Welcome, and happy Thursday. I gotta fix this. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I am your host, I am your producer. I am left unsupervised for today. Someone really did not think this one through. Um, Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I've got 3 hours of content for you guys. We got a jam packed day. I'm going to be joined by none other than Lord of Jorts himself, Eric Norris. If you want a good laugh, hop on over to Twitter. If you're not following at Video Bitcoin, go ahead and do that now. And then check out the thread on who the hell is Eric Norris. And then we'll be joined by Jimmy Song in the last hour. But I'll kick things off just now with news and notes. And as I mentioned, I am literally flying solo. So excuse any and all technical difficulties you will see because I'm now the producer. Both Chris and P decided to take a vacation at the same time. So if you see them at BitBlock Boom, which is where they are actually, give them a shout out, go give them a hug, and give them shit for leaving me alone because, oh my god, this is probably going to go really wrong before it goes right. But let's have some fun with it. All right. No one's gonna stop me from saying certain things. So if there was ever a day that this channel had high risk of getting shut down, attacked, or whatever, today is that day. But I'm gonna just start by swinging. Um, Scammer BitBoy Crypto says he is dropping the defamation suit against a different YouTuber because he didn't realize the dispute with Tozy. I don't know. I don't follow any of these crypto people, to be quite honest with you. Would become public if he sued the alleged defamer in federal court. Uh, I think that's fucking hilarious. I'm sorry. Trying not to curse today. I think it's hilarious that BitBoy is like now realizing, oh, if you take someone to a court of law, this becomes public record, and they will also analyze how accurate his statements are because it almost sounds like he thinks he's a scammer. Because if you don't think you're a scammer, you're going to go into that and be like, all right, fine, whatever. Like, I don't care that this is public record. I'm not a scammer. But if you are a scammer, you don't want it brought into light. You don't want public record of that. That's all I'm saying about that. I'll let the court of public opinion decide. I'm going to move on, though, now to some more shitcoinery, and then I promise we're done with shitcoinery for today-ish. The Block launches a tokenized paywall. The Block is a crypto media company, and they are moving. I do not believe, but correct me if I'm wrong in the chats, guys, if this actually has any affiliation with Square Block. I do not believe they do. So more or less, they're saying that now they're going to put some of their content behind a paywall. There's going to be I want to make sure I have the name of the access token. Like that's what this is. It's literally an access token. They're not even trying to like hide it. It's available to be. You can purchase it at various crypto marketplaces. This is dumb, in my opinion, but like, there's an argument to be made that it's no different than just paying your monthly subscription to whatever news outlet you sometimes pay a little extra to get their paywalled content from. I just don't understand why we have to tokenize and introduce a blockchain to that concept. You could just as easily, truly just as easily, introduce your entire system on top of the Lightning Network and then introduce tipping. Or if you do not yet already own Carrot, you should. What is the Carrot app? It is this, except it's better for you. Instead of you having to pay for paywalled content that Bitcoin Magazine and other Bitcoin-oriented media outlets publish, Carrot will pay you for reading the ads in a few sats here or there. But this is a circular economy in a nutshell. Use this app. If you're going to read Bitcoin Magazine articles, there's no better way to do it than on the Carrot app. So didn't intend for this to be a Carrot shill, but to be honest, it's a no-brainer. And then they could have done this and essentially said, oh, if you want to pay for this, you can pay a few sats to access this one article, which inevitably I think all content will go in that direction. So it's disappointing to see a crypto media company go down by the wayside. As I say it out loud, no, it's not their fucking competitor. So whatever, you snooze to you lose. The Block will probably be out of business by the end of the decade. I want to talk about two different reports now out of Asia and Eurasia. I'm going to start with India. There are reports coming out and some like weird statistics getting thrown out online. I want to clarify something. I saw this number getting thrown around that more than half of Indian investors own some sort of crypto. The key word there is investors because not every single citizen in India is an investor. In fact, I believe the number I saw was 15% of the entire population holds some sort of cryptocurrency. So a little bit of a misleading statistic there that I wanted to highlight. And another one that I saw, this one on Cointelegraph, 50 72% of Russians say they have never bought Bitcoin. That's a daunting number. Like 72%, that's a C minus. That's an overwhelming majority. Like sh- anything passes in the Senate with 72%, right? It's not 75, right? It's 66. Correct me in the chat. Like I really need Chris to call me out on some of the stupid things I say sometimes. I miss you, Chris. Hope you're having fun. Um, the reason I hate this statistic, what is it really saying on the other side? It's saying that 28% of Russians say they have bought Bitcoin. That is huge. 28% of a country have purchased Bitcoin. That is a growing class of adoption if I ever saw one. And that's what disappoints me about this Cointelegraph article. It's not clickbait; it's fear bait almost. They they just misrepresent this, and this could have been a far more bullish and exciting talking point. And I urge you instead to look at this from the lens of 28% of Russians buy and have bought Bitcoin. Whether or not you agree with the reasons why they need to start buying Bitcoin and the ongoing sanctions and whatnot, besides the point, Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for your friends just as much as it is for your enemies. So this is actually a very bullish thing, in my opinion, to see that a country of Russia's stature on the global stage has 28% of their citizens saying they have purchased Bitcoin. That's huge. That is a huge thing. Uh, I want to talk now about some SPACs. We're going to go to the public markets. Uh, Chamath, SPAC King, has no involvement in this, but I do want to say that it looks like Bitcoin Depot, a leading Bitcoin ATM operator, is going to become a publicly traded company through an SPAC, of course. Why is this matter? Why is this important? Well, this is the first of its kind. This is exciting. This also kind of is like, oh, they really need some money. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. That's what's going on. Um, but it is, again, a step towards Bitcoin entering the mainstream more and more. Um, it excites me to see this step forward. My sort of philosophy on Bitcoin stocks and Bitcoin adjacent stocks. So I'm trying to read the chat at the same time as talking. Terrible idea. So I'm gonna probably miss a lot of chat conversation today. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I found the chat. Let's go. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. I really don't know what's going on here, so you guys are gonna have to bear with the technical difficulties from time to time today. Um, my MO on Bitcoin adjacent equities, there's a lot more volatility in them in the public markets. Look, if you have a cash account, like a brokerage account that you can access the money, I see no reason to not have Bitcoin. But of course, none of this is financial advice. Do not listen to a guy who lives in his mother's basement and base all of your life financial decisions on just what I say. For the love of God, don't do that. Um, but like, retirement accounts, different exposures, different ways to diversify. There's a case to be made, and I want to shout out the Bitcoin Magazine Pro guys for pointing this out. Way back at their year-end report for their 2021 report, they highlighted the fact that actually, if you had purchased Bitcoin mining stocks at the beginning of 2021, that was a better investment than owning Bitcoin throughout the course of the entire year. Um, that pattern is going to repeat in different areas as Bitcoin companies enter the public markets to raise money for themselves while the fiat circus continues. And that's something that we will talk about today with both Jimmy and Lord Norris. But this idea that we're still in this system. And if there are certain opportunities there, should we not use this system to our benefit and to our advantage while it's there? Especially given most of us now seem to have a better understanding of the incentive structures behind the scenes and how the system was really built up and why it was built in the way it was. But that's a conversation not for me to just have because none of you guys are going to like what I have to say about that. Um, why am I still rambling on about this SPAC? This is going to be the first ever Bitcoin ATM company that's publicly traded. Um, this is a step towards hyper Bitcoinization. This is a step towards something though that I would love to pick someone like Matt Odell's brain about. Um, my understanding is that Bitcoin ATMs are one of the last bastions of KYC free Bitcoin. Look, some ATMs may require you to enter an ID. My understanding is that you don't. I personally have never purchased from an ATM, a Bitcoin ATM. However, if these companies start to enter the public sector, you can see some pressures from the government about around KYC regulations. So that is the thing that I'm going to be paying attention to out of this, not aping into Bitcoin Depot. Should the merge, technically it is a merge, but should GSR2 Meteora Acquisition Corp approve the merge with Bitcoin Depot, uh, I'm not looking for exposure here, but do your own due diligence, not financial advice. So the next story, staying in the public sector, Bitcoin miner Argo cuts year-end hash rate, citing delayed Intel mining rigs as a result of why they're cutting their hash rate. They projected to end 2022 at 5.5 exahash a second. Their current projections are down 42% to 3.2 exahash per second for the end of this year. That's a huge drop off. And again, I'm going to shout out the guys at Bitcoin Magazine Pro because they anticipated this. If you are not yet subscribed to Bitcoin Magazine Pro, please do yourself a favor because the research and the analysis that Dylan and Sam do have time and time again proven to be so valid and right. And in a conversation that we had with them way back in January, Sam specifically highlighted excuse me, Sam specifically highlighted the ongoing issues with supply chains and specifically the chip shortages, and how while it's not really a talking point in the Bitcoin mining space yet, the chip shortages could impact miners' ability to get and open up, uh, get and receive the Bitcoin miners that they want in order to obtain this hash rate level that they had forecasted. Mind you, a drop in Bitcoin price, rising cost of energy. Other factors are definitely at play here. There's a lot of headwind going against these Bitcoin miners from essentially increasing their hash rate. But I do think it is very interesting that with all these things happening at once, we're now starting to see consistently throughout the mining space uh, forecasts getting slashed. So again, something to keep an eye on. We're going to talk more about microchips in just a minute, but I don't even think, candidly, as I list out some of these other things, I don't think just because all of a sudden you get all these miners now, then they're going to be able to turn them all on. So it remains to be seen, something to be aware of, because I do think this will impact Bitcoin's price as well as mass adoption for the shorter term. Uh, I'm just trying to read the chats in between these stories because, yes, guys, this is your worst nightmare. This is just a Q show. I have no balance, no semblance on today's, but we will be joined by Lord Norris and Jimmy Song. So there will be other people here than just me. So you got me for about 12 more minutes. One more publicly traded mining company, Mawson Infrastructure Group, announced July 2022 Bitcoin self mining, hosting co-location, energy demand response, operational update. They sent out their updates essentially saying they now have approximately 44,000 ASIC Bitcoin miners deployed. Unaudited revenue estimated to be approximately $1.8 million for July 2022. They produced 90 Bitcoin in July. Mm, I think this was the company actually that I want to highlight because they have not been selling their Bitcoin. This is a company that I have actually now put on my watch list and I'm paying close attention to. Um, they have not been selling Bitcoin. They have not been selling ASICs. They've been buying these things up, which signals to me that they have been very smart and have been keeping their debt at such a manageable level that even with this sell off in Bitcoin's price, they've been able to maintain and grow. That's very, very bullish given the current circumstances. So, Mawson's Infrastructure Group, a mining company to keep an eye on there. NVIDIA, Paul Pelosi's best ever trade all time, and everyone's favorite chip maker. They announced that their chip crypto mining chip revenue continues to fall. Um, they were deemed nominal for the second straight quarter. I wanted to highlight this because we talked about NVIDIA right after their earnings report, and they were talking about how their gaming chips were essentially slowing down sales, and that in turn decreased their profits for Q2. Now we're seeing reports that are specifically highlighting their cryptocurrency mining processor chips. Sorry, cotton mouth. Look, this comes as no surprise, really. I don't really think this is a story, nor do I think it's a non-story. It's just something to be aware of that NVIDIA is now reporting and highlighting their cryptocurrency chip making as a separate division, a separate talking point. And I think that's going to be really important because what that tells me is internal discussions are signaling that that is going to be a very lucrative branch of their business in the years to come. It may not necessarily be large enough to have an impact, have a conversation in their earnings calls today in 2022 or even in 2023. But the expectation internally is that potentially by 2030, by 2028, yeah, that'll be a major talking point on their earnings calls. So that's the way I'm interpreting this. I think it's a really interesting story. Ultimately, NVIDIA makes way too many of our chips as well. So we'll see. Keep an eye out for, where I don't know why I hid this story for myself, but like Intel will have their new chip foundry, and that'll be huge. Personally, I think Intel is probably the worst chip manufacturer of the group, if I'm being quite honest with you. But it's bullish to get it diversified and spread out amongst various different companies rather than just having one company make all the chips. I want to do a different story that I hid from myself, but it was just too good that I had to. So, what the fuck is going on with Celsius? Celsius alleges that a former money manager lost, misappropriated, or stole a big chunk of customer assets. Celsius attorneys allege that Stone Kaifi attempted to obfuscate. Fuck, I can't say that word. Sorry, obfuscate. I don't know. Someone tell me how to pronounce it later. It's more or less saying that this guy used Tornado Cash to convert some of their assets, Celsius's assets, into NFTs. A bit of an issue considering that Tornado Cash has been blacklisted and banned by the US. Um, this would actually be kind of wild, and like honestly, I just want to eat some more popcorn and watch this story develop because it seems like the circus show that is Celsius knows no limit and has no shame of how much contagion can they be a part of. Not saying that this Tornado Cash thing is contagion, more so that it's just continuing to overlap and find itself involved in every debacle and every issue going on. Um, on the topic of continuing to drag things out, though, we have some good news about 3AC. Liquidators got a bit of a win. The Singapore High Court granted Teneo, the petitioner, access to any financial records. Teneo is the advisory firm appointed by the British Virgin Island Court. Teneo wants to see what 3AC is up to and how they are securing its assets through the liquidation process. This is huge. This is called accountability. This is something that you guys all know that I love. So this will be great. I think it'll be more bloodshed for 3AC. I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden we see some things come to light about 3AC in the coming weeks and months that has not yet been reported on because now Teneo is getting to the bottom of it. So something to be aware of, something to keep an eye on there. Now, I wanted to highlight the Middle East with a couple of different stories now as we wind down news and notes. So first, Afghanistan the authorities shut down 16 crypto exchanges in 1 week, essentially citing, and I'm going to quote Syed Shah Sadat, head of the counter crime unit of Herat Police. Law enforcement closed down the platforms and arrested their staff. This move came after the country's central bank stated in a letter that digital currency trading has caused lots of problems and is scamming people. So this is one government's attempt, mind you, this is the Taliban's attempt at stopping scammers. Um, this is troublesome. This is worrisome because this assumes then that everyone who is using these platforms is a scammer. If you have not read If you have not read Check Your Financial Privilege by Alex Gladstein, I urge you to at least go and look up his article where he interviewed a young Afghanistani woman who discovered Bitcoin years and years ago and understood its value in the country of Afghanistan because women aren't able to hold bank accounts. Cryptocurrency is a refuge for some of these people. This is an opportunity for them to hide, store, and maintain their wealth that they otherwise wouldn't even be allowed to because of their gender. Um, this is this is not a good thing at all, and I know I'm one of the loudest and maybe to crypto enthusiasts, one of the most obnoxious people when I call every crypto exchange a crypto casino, and I have nothing kind to say about any of them, quite honestly. But if this is the only option for citizens of Afghanistan, and now their only options to access Bitcoin is via peer-to-peer transactions, it became far more difficult now to both onboard new Bitcoin users as well as try to just, you know, grow do something as simple as for us here in westernized countries, DCAing or growing our stack, like we take that for granted. We truly do, because now there is a country that citizens desperately need this technology, not as a savings tool, but as a life raft. And their government is shutting down access for the sake of scammers, which can be construed as well intentioned. But ultimately, this is a poor attempt at solving a problem that does exist. On the one hand, honestly, I'm just more mad at the scammers who ultimately end up taking advantage of all these people. I'm rambling at this point. I got Lord Norris in the back room. I'm going to tell my last story. Um, oh, I found the Intel story. Intel has struck a $30 billion deal to build a new chip factory, part of which is used to build Bitcoin mining chips. But that's not the story I wanted to end on. I wanted to end once again on the Middle East, this time following up the protest that we saw of the gentleman in Turkey. We now have reports out of Pakistan that there are potential bank limits being put on its citizens. And now people have taken to the streets and are protesting this. So power to the people there. I hope this ends positively for them. Ultimately, the state is once again trying to usurp themselves and put far too much control over the people and how they choose to spend their money. We're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be joined shortly by Eric Norris. And I want to, before we do that, remind everyone that tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale now. So use promo code BM Live to get 10% off and come join us in Amsterdam. It'll be a good time. We will be back right after this. Once I figure out which one of these ads I'm supposed to run. Oh, this one. What is up, everyone? Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. I am excited to introduce our guest for today. It is none other than Lord of Jorts himself, the professional hype man, founder and CEO of Going Parabolic. He is Jason Williams' boss, daddy, and king, Lord Norris. What is up, my guy?
You know what? Just end the show after that. That's awesome.
Oh man, like in all honesty, I am fucking around a little bit, but not wholeheartedly when I gave you that introduction. But how would you? What did I miss? How would you describe yourself?
I don't think you missed much other than like me being better looking than you.
Well, now I just know you're full of shit. So,
This is so dangerous. I feel like, yeah, just you're let loose today.
dude, this was a bad idea. Like, truly, I I didn't speak up when everyone was like, "Wait, so like, what's the plan on the day where like both P and Chris are on vacation?" I was like, "Yeah, I got
Yeah.
this."
I think,
And
those times when YouTube channels get banned and all of Twitter gets mad and they fight for you. But I think when this gets banned today, everyone's not going to fight for you. They're just gonna understand that, yeah, there's reasons why. Yeah.
yeah, no, that like fuck that kid. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Q definitely did something to fuck himself over. But we got a jam-packed day, and I just want to sort of talk to you about how are you doing in the bear market?
Yeah. Interesting. It's yeah, I think I've been here. I feel like I've lived more in the bear market than the bull market, but yeah, it's interesting. I think I love the last story. I was tuning in. I think it's what's not being. I don't know, maybe in the bubble that I live in, but I think Celsius is really. It should. I think it should be on more people's radar, right? Is it fair to say they're one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies in the U.S., if not the biggest? I know Alex came on. He was on a podcast like 6 months ago before all the drama, and he actually made the statement that he was the biggest. But I've seen that challenged. But do we know where they stand? Not that it really matters, other than
I think at this point, if
uh,
Alex Mashinsky is your source, I
yeah,
probably don't trust it. If I'm just
fair,
being honest
fair,
with you, like if
totally fair.
someone else, like if Jason Less came out and said Celsius is our largest competitor, they are the largest Bitcoin mining
Yeah,
business or just crypto mining business out there.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
Fred
Okay,
Thiel. But if Mashinsky's be like, I am the best, I have the biggest, dude
yeah.
probably has a micro penis. Just saying.
Yeah, I get it. He's got a lifted F-250 diesel truck in the parking lot. Like, but no, I think it's interesting. It's for me in this bear market. It's caught my attention. If we can agree they're substantial. I mean, whatever, they clearly hold a ton of assets. And the Bitcoin they were generating. If I've heard everything from 5 Bitcoin a day to 15 Bitcoin a day they were producing. Plus, I've heard a million different stories, but I think it's good. I'm really watching what's gonna happen, what the plan is, who's gonna scoop them up. I think not necessarily, we always talk about Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck like about anything, but I think it'll be interesting if you see some, I don't know, like is this an opportunity for somebody like Jamie Dimon to jump in and say, hey, let me scoop this up and start changing things. I don't know. I think you also, you brought up too earlier before I hopped on as well about I don't know, these, different mining companies and leveraging Bitcoin and getting into the market while this is, and it's also like, I think if you put on that Bitcoin maxi hat a little bit too, I think that it's a little bit slippery of a slope to, um, you know, when you start seeing Bitcoin acting more as a security, right? And you start, when you see, I don't know, it's kind of it's a slippery
Let's
slope.
unpack that. Like, what do you mean by Bitcoin acting like a security?
Well, I think again, cliche, we're still so early, right? We're early, like,
Totally.
a couple percent of the world owns it, whatever it is, but, and knows about it. And so I think when anybody hears about Bitcoin and we talk about trading initially, or if that's the first time they're exposed to it, they're not going to be able to unpack really what Bitcoin is. And I think the more that we're tied to the system, and I think if you go back 2, 3, 4 years ago with like USCO and Pomp, and when they're going on mainstream media and everything that they're trying to kind of convince or preach is really like decoupling from the stock markets, decoupling from other assets out there, why it's strong. And then so, but I feel like we're not, because of the exposure now it's gotten, now it's kind of being adopted in a lot of these traditional legacy systems where, again, if you're like that, if you have that ultra maxi hat on where you're like, no, we want to separate from all that, we're like, it's counterintuitive in my opinion when we're trying to I don't know, trying to apply it into more of like these standard traditional trading platforms. Again, all exposure, there's no such thing as bad marketing, and I can see this argument from both ends. I could literally sit here and argue with myself, but you know, I don't know. I think you want to be a little a little careful what you see happening in the markets with Bitcoin specifically.
That's fair. I mean, I'm kind of curious because like you and I, Eric, if you haven't seen our first conversation on this show, you should definitely take the time to go back. I was just, chilling on the beaches of Mexico, and
Yeah.
we were talking about, and essentially Lord Norris came to me and asked me to have confessions and confess his shitcoin sins. Um, but like to your point, yes, there's a lot going on that is starting to have some like negative stories, if you will. But I'm
Mm,
with you. All press is good press at the end of the day.
right.
But when we watch things like the SEC go after Coinbase and then listing 10 different altcoins, shitcoins as securities, or now you have
Yeah.
the DOJ going after Tornado Cash and more or less Ethereum. And then you're starting to realize like, okay, they are going after these things that at least Bitcoin maxis have been saying these are unregistered securities. Um, I wonder where you sit in the camp of like, these are attacks that will eventually be used against Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. Obviously, look, it's easy to say as an American citizen, right? The government is slowly, however, trying to take more control and regulate against that, right? And I think the beautiful part is you have some Bitcoiners that are in the political space that they're seeing the corruption, they're seeing right everything that we already know, the manipulation and stuff like that with our dollars and things like that. So, but at the end of the day, right? The big league wins, the big guys are going to win, and regulation is going to come in, and I don't think a lot of these lawmakers understand the impact and the potential impact that Bitcoin can have. Truly, at the end of the day, separating from everything that they are built on, funded by, run, managed, and so on. So yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. When you see Bitcoin tied to those top 10 cryptos on Fox Business, right? It's like, oh, geez. And then I'm trying to convince somebody on the street. I'm trying to orange pill them and tell them like, look, stop thinking about that. Stop when you turn on the news, right? That's you're assuming that's reality, and it's not. So it does make it very tough. But I think to your point, I think at that point it makes it very easy to regulate. And I think the more that right, that's coupled with all the shit coins, and that's the news, and that's the message, and then it's traded like shit coins, and then it's leveraged against like shit coins, and we're pushing for these companies to go right, whether we're pushing or not, they're going to go public. Anybody's going to go out. If you're a mining company, somebody strokes you a check for $100 million, and they create this whole package to go public. Guess what? 9 out of 10 dudes, no matter how personal sovereignty they are, they're like, you know what? That's cool, but that $100 million check is even cooler, right? So it's as much as we want to say, we're all good people until somebody strokes a big check. For the most part. But anyways, yeah. So I don't know. I think that's kind of my take on it.
No, it's fair. I mean, look, I'm just going to sound like a broken record to people who've been watching this show consistently, but like, this is not a cause for celebration. This is not a win for Bitcoin with these type of state attacks.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, I think, over the next 2, possibly 3 years to see sort of what else gets developed. I mean, we have a midterm election. You're seeing different senators really start to run, advocate, and talk about Bitcoin on the political stage. I'm saving the full blown politics talk for later in the show. Once I loosen him up, once I loosen Lord Norris up, we'll dive into the politics of it all. But like Bitcoin on the political stage, at a certain point, like it becomes a mainstream enough issue because the voter base is large enough.
Yeah.
Um, where like what are your feelings? Are there any politicians who talk on Bitcoin and crypto that you're paying attention to what they do or say, or do you just not care about any of them?
I love what like CJ and the guys at the BTC Coalition are doing. I think they're awesome, and I've been a part and I've brought politicians to them, to have conversations. God, though, in reality, like just in full transparency, man, I think people jump on the train to try to, if they, they're trying to get, if they can gain another 5% of votes, right? Like it's tough. And and as a Bitcoiner, you want them talking about it. The other side, they're like, okay, if I talk about it, I'll get more votes and done deal. It's a win-win kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I don't know. And that's why I love what the BTC coalition is doing in that sense of arming these politicians who are interested with information. Now, whether they digest that, whether that's something they're going to live, breathe, I don't know. Um, it's tough. I really I try to live extremely open minded, and I also understand though that the system, we need to decouple ourselves from the system. So that's more the camp that I stand on. So when we talk about right markets and securities with and we talk about politicians in those camps, I want to zoom out, right? Like my rant is, the way I look at this, and I've told kind of a lot of people like this is, as a society here, we are basically like in an NFL stadium, and you've got red and blue teams in the field. You've got everybody in the stands who are fighting with each other. They're passionate about their one team. They're killing each other, you name it. And over above, you've got the NFL, you got the league, right? Who's like, hey, this is a puppet show. We're going to, we're going to control, we're going to make the rules. We're going to figure out how everyone's paid, all this, right? And so, but nobody's looking up at the league like, hey, we're all being duped and everything. So, in the same sense of you've got these team leaders, you've got the, which I would consider politicians. They're all fighting for the system, right? That we understand is broken. So when we get down in those trenches of that, I don't know. I think it's a guise. Like I think they want to throw the Bitcoin flag, but you could argue if you're a politician and really throwing the Bitcoin flag, you should fight against the party you're probably tied to. That's that's bold. Like, and I see Bitcoin. I see a lot of folks on Twitter, these different influencers and things, and they're jumping on these camps and they're yelling at other camps and other sides. And I'm like, guys, this is really against everything that you believe in. If Bitcoin is the foundation and the solution to all of our problems in this world. So I don't know. That's where I get a little on edge when we talk about like who we're tracking and what we're pushing. Like, man, that's for me. Like, yeah, personal freedoms, freedom, money, sovereignty, like all those things. You can't have that if you're pushing for one team on the field.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Where I think I've been really stuck, and I really appreciate and I'm grateful for our friendship. I've reached out to you numerous times in the past where like I've just said point blank, hey, I know we see fully opposite sides of one issue, but like, can I just like hear your perspective? And I'm grateful that you've shared it with me. And I'm kind of like, look, I've admit this. Bitcoin Twitter, Bitcoiners can cancel me. I always welcome that. Like I voted for Bernie twice in a row. Like that
Right.
is sort of the type of person that I've been in the past. I also am the type of person that's now can recognize and say, oh, Bernie Sanders is dope. He is the best of them, but his
Yeah.
policies couldn't work. Like I've made my peace with that. What I am curious your thoughts are is when we do reach this point of hyper Bitcoinization, and Bitcoin is a widely accepted currency. We have that slogan of Bitcoin is for enemies.
Mm.
We talk about sovereignty and that being what Bitcoin provides, but is there not the potential for a statist class to also be using Bitcoin and have access to it? Because if Bitcoin is for enemies, it is also for those who don't agree with being a sovereign individual. Whether or
Mm.
not they're right or wrong, that's not for me to decide. I just feel like if that is the way they choose, and I'm curious if and how Bitcoiners, like, how would you feel if the US government started to turn around and saying, look, we now adopt, like, Bitcoin is legal tender. You can use it, but we are going to see all these transactions that happen on US soil with Bitcoin. and people will find ways to sort of hide, scrub their identities and figure out ways to do it, sure. But say the United States co-opted this now as sort of a state, almost having some sort of state oversight,
Mm.
going perfectly against the sovereign individual thesis there. Like,
Yeah.
would Bitcoiners run away? And in the chat as well, guys, throw it. I cannot figure out how to get your guys' comments on the screen. I am so sorry, but we will. We will figure this out. So if you have something to say, say it.
Um, yeah, I think it's a really good. I think it's a really good question, and I'd definitely be open to hearing a lot of people takes on it. Like, so, I mean, I think for me, my personal take, and it could be ignorant, but it's just kind of my feeling on it, is that I think we thrive with Bitcoin as maintaining as an alternative asset class. Um, I think the more in the U.S., if you the more we want to adopt it as tender, I think the more regulation that comes with that, right? So the more they're going to have their hands on it. I mean, shoot, who knows? FBI. I mean, what you saw, like FBI may own more Bitcoin than anybody in the world. Who knows? So it's like, what do we really know? They could be the biggest holder of Bitcoin right now, and so they could be very pro, right? Bitcoin in that way, and they also may be against it, right? I don't know. I think in the U.S. Becoming legal tender, they're going to freaking tax the hell out of it. They're going to, everything is going to be pushed for KYC, and I don't know. I just I like it better as an American, as I build my wealth through the rest of my life, having it as an alternative asset class that where there isn't the focus of regulation, where I can store money safely outside of the system, where I know I have the ability to jump ship and go to Fiji if I want to and live in a tent for the rest of my life. I don't know. So that's kind of my take. I'm really scared of it becoming or getting pushed for legal tender, and I know that doesn't probably align with most Bitcoiners.
Oh, no, that's fair. I mean, I'm of the camp where I'm like, yo, guys, let's not do anything for a little bit with Bitcoin so that I can like grow my stack. And then when I feel like my stack is enough, then we can go to the moon.
Yeah, just
That's
send a
just,
message out like, yeah, hey Joe, all right, cool, we're good
yeah,
now.
don't don't do anything for at least 18 more
Yeah.
months
Well,
with the price of
that's
Bitcoin.
exactly, but that's like to my point though, right? Like, let's chill. I'd rather Bitcoin be behind the scenes more or less, and let's not put this on billboards everywhere. Like, hey, listen, the best alternative to your U.S. dollar. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to see that. You see that billboard flying over the White House? Do you ever, no, right? Unless we have major problems or so. So, but I think that's how you have to think about it, right? Like, this energy, where is it going to? Because everybody is quick to say, let's make it legal tender, and I don't know if you understand the consequences of that. So it's kind of my perspective, my take on it. I think there's honestly a lot of power right now having it as this alternative asset class, that you have the freedom to use, and that's the power of Bitcoin right now. I mean, shit, man, they can make things really difficult for us Bitcoiners in the U.S. if they want to. Like, they really can, and we call me out on bullshit, but they can. So I mean, I enjoy the freedom now, and I'd rather have that than perhaps easier use of, going to an ATM. Like, I don't know, make it a little more difficult for me to access, make it a little bit more challenging for me to hold, but don't freaking tax me 80% on it, right? Like, let's stay away from that. And I think that's the road you're going down, right? Like, that's the slip and slide in the back of the house that leads into the lake of shit. Like, let's keep pushing for this, but guys, you're literally driving off a cliff right now if you're not careful. So I don't know.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, these covert state attacks are slowly and surely happening. I had the great opportunity to read a white paper that's going to be submitted to Congress by BPI, and we're going to have the authors or the author of it on the show. But one of the points they brought up is how, you have on one side of the spectrum China, which is like the most authoritarian state in the world, and then like sort of how they've grown their GDP through that. But then on the other end of that spectrum, you sort of have the freedom of America and what that has afforded and the growth that has provided. But then it highlights how throughout Xi Jinping's sort of career, he has really put forward oversight and like become almost a big brother, like the literal big brother
Mhm.
in China, and how a CBDC would essentially be exactly that. It would be the most oversight a government could ever have over its citizens' monies. But it's not just the People's Bank of China that's working on this; it's the Federal Reserve as well. And I forget the exact number. I want to say it was 92% of of all the banks involved in this CBDC research that both the Bank of China and the Federal Reserve are a part of. There are other banks doing this research. 92% of the wealth in the world is involved in these banks that are all
Mm.
working together to make a CBDC. So it begs the question of they just really want to like have this insane control over everyone.
Mm.
So like I don't think you're being hyperbolic when you say like they can make our lives more difficult, and they eventually will. I
Yeah.
mean, they like history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And historically speaking, like the state has made life harder for citizens that they don't agree with. You can literally this year look north of the border to Canada for that exact example. A bunch of people
Yeah.
said stuff that Justin Trudeau didn't like, didn't agree with, and what did he do? He made them like outlaws essentially,
Yeah.
shut off
Yeah.
their fucking bank accounts. So
Like, what do you like? I'm curious, though, like in your world, because I know you actually are, you're on Twitter, but you also live in the real world. Unlike I think a majority of people on Twitter. But yeah, do you like? I don't. It's mind blowing to me, like just the people I'm around. It could be a random bar, wherever it may be, like who, and they could be really educated folks, but when it comes to CBDC, like they don't like nobody knows anything, and they're not like concerned about it. I actually, it's wild. I meant to bring it up, but like 2 days ago, my mom actually texted me, and my mom will like read a story, and she literally will go like on exile herself because she's so scared kind of person. But she's sending me links to like, oh my god, have you heard about this? And I'm like, yeah, mom, I've been telling you about this for like the last like 2 years. You haven't really listened to me, but some dude writes some letter on the Guardian, and you're like, oh my god, I don't know. Anyways, I guess what I'm getting at, like, when you meet random people, when you're talking to them, like, is this something that people are aware of? Because I still think, and when I do bring it up, people are like, oh no, that would never happen here. And I'm like, well, all signs are leading to like they're going to want to start pushing this here. And you saw the note from the Federal Reserve, like we're researching it and all these things. Like I don't, I'm kind of lost. And maybe it's because I'm in the Bitcoin bubble world that I know about this. And I've heard about Mark Yusko screaming about it for the last couple of years, but I don't know. Is that something that you hear of?
like specific to CBDCs,
Yeah, yeah. Like,
uh,
are people know about like what
no,
happened in
like
the Bank of Ukraine when people are like, hey, they're fleeing and they're like, yeah, okay, well, cool. Here's like $1,000, and this is the most you can withdraw, and have a great life in a different world. Like that should scare the hell out of everybody.
everyone. No,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, specific to CBDCs with my normie friends, like absolutely not. Like
yeah,
with when I still have a lot of ties to normie land, if I'm being quite honest with you, and like it's like split. Half of my friends literally won't stop asking me about like Bitcoin or crypto related questions, and then the other
yeah.
half just like have no interest whatsoever in like having those type of conversations with me. And it's interesting because like some of their responses are like, I just like I don't care to know or understand that.
Like
And
ignorance is bliss kind of thing. Like,
like it truly is like actually on that, like I had one of my very good friends from college like ask me, is like, do you feel like worse like knowing the things that you know, like
mm,
seeing and connecting
mm,
the dots that you do, not necessarily saying that like this is what will pass, but seeing the potential calamities. um and I mean, it is nerve wracking, but at a certain point, some things just aren't like I can't stop if the governments want to roll out a CBDC. I can choose whether or not I interact with that technology and how I interact with that technology. But
yeah,
like worrying myself over they're going to introduce this state controlled monetary surveillance tech, ultimately, no, I don't. It's out of my control. Like I've gotten really good about that. That's something I'm really proud of at 29 years
Basically,
old.
like walking into that like nasty club at night, you're like, I could get herpes walking in this club, but I'm not going to participate, kind of thing. Like,
I mean, when you want to say it like that, like yeah, like literally I could see it, and I'm like, nope.
stay
um,
strong, stay strong.
yeah. Um, it it's also interesting to me, just you know, some of the bullshit narratives that people are buying too, because
Mm,
it's not even that they're understanding that CBDCs are surveillance. Like truly, all a CBDC is
yeah,
state run money that they can see every transaction in real time. And I think actually, I forgot to bring this point up. I think there's another thing where, again, where it comes to my normie friends, like I come from a privileged background. I don't know any of my friends who don't have a bank account.
mm,
Almost all of my friends have a credit card. Like we've KYC'd ourselves by having these accounts in the ways that we do. And there is a degree in which I think if you were to explain, like I can think of like two or three of my friends off the top of my head where if I were to just like go down this rabbit hole of a CBDC with them, they'd be like, right, but like if the government wanted to know what I'm spending all my money on, like they can just subpoena Bank of America and
right,
whatever bank or like whatever bank I bank with and whatever credit card I use, like a Discover card or Capital One or whatever, like they could just reach out to these businesses and subpoena, and they'd get that same information with the exception of those cash transactions. But it's that at least step of friction that exists right now versus like, no, there's now going to just be someone with a government job. So think a DMV worker who is going to be watching what you spend your money on. And if you spend your money at the wrong time of day, go to the
yeah,
wrong place, spend it on the wrong thing, or this guy just, I don't know, slips on his fucking keyboard accidentally, like now all of a sudden, like your wallet's shut down.
yeah,
And again, my expectations is if this gets rolled out, the quality of workers in this department are akin to the DMV. So imagine now, instead of having to call like a bank where customer service is actually a part of how these banks compete with one another, now all of a sudden you have the government that doesn't care because they are everyone's bank. Everyone's got to use them. Imagine getting locked out on accident. Like truly just an accident. Someone pressed the wrong button
yeah,
and you do not have access to your money because it's state run money, but like you've got to wait in like a DMV-esque line almost to get your uh wallet unlocked. That's a scary
yeah.
proposition.
It is, and I think you don't. Yeah, until you have that feeling, until you ever felt that. I mean, literally, like real life. Yesterday, my PayPal account was hacked. Two-factor authorization, everything hacked. They created a business profile. They added two credit cards. They still wired money out of my checking account that I had tied to it. And that feeling of getting those emails, it's just like being SIM swap, basically. And this was happening literally yesterday morning. I'm getting these email notifications like address changed, name changed, account like profile changed, and then I got those emails, and then it said payment sent, payment sent, payment sent. I got 5 payments, and I'm getting this in live time, and I'm trying to get in, and oh my god, like uh, the good news is PayPal as of last night they refunded me all the money, but when you're seeing that and you lose access to your money and then your whole bank account is at risk, that is an anxiety that most 99% of people haven't felt that before, right? Like, and I think if you take that parallel to CBDC, right? If you go early of COVID, right? I tried to go to the bank. I was buying a car. I needed a cashier's check. They're like, we're closed, appointments only, and we're booked for the next 3 weeks. I'm like, what are you talking about? You have my money. Like I need to get a check for it, right? And so I think when people start experiencing that a little bit, and then you say, look, this is the model of CBDC that can basically, like you said, like you're gonna have control over the decisions you make with your money. Like I don't know if people really understand that. So that's a big thing that I love talking about because it is the perfect segue right now. It's such a great conversation piece to orange pill people, family members, everything. Like if you don't understand Bitcoin, understand the problem first, right? And then it's an easy solution, easy answer.
I want to know if you think, like, what do you think of Vitalik? What do you think of
Ooh.
crypto founders in general, but more specifically Vitalik?
I'm probably on the fence. Um, Obviously, a huge impact, right? Like you can't. I mean, I respect success of anyone, right? And he's clearly made a huge impact. Now, the paths he's taken, in some ways, I don't know, man. Is there something specifically that you're trolling for, or
No,
yeah?
no, 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 no. Like,
Um,
genuinely curious. Like, I mean, I think he is like, I'm slowly buying into this narrative that I've created myself, and I want to start the rumor of that he's
yeah.
like a Vladimir Putin puppet,
Mm.
and that he secretly is like a deep agent for Russia and the KGB.
Yeah, you never know, right? I mean, but the guy's got extreme power right now. And yeah, yeah. I think when we go back to, I think the foundation of everything, if it's decentralization, if that's the key in freedom. I mean, you're talking about a dude that has has a lot of centralized power, right? And now his these smart contracts, everything that he's doing, everything that everywhere that's implemented, it's got a ton of power. And I mean, I think there's been a lot of potential disruptors come in the market, uh, but I don't know if anybody's made a stronger case, and nobody's really, I feel, taken market share from it. So that speaks volumes in itself, right? If you put all everything else, gossip aside, whatever, but real world utility. I mean, I don't know what the current volume is a day, but Jesus, dude, you got a guy that's an absolute powerhouse. But the guy's got control over the code, right?
Well, that's my whole issue is, and I've yet to get an answer that I think justifies this. So I hate Jerome Powell. I think he's just a bozo. Like, he was put in a no-win situation, sure, but I think he sucks. Federal Reserve
Yeah.
sucks, should be abolished. I kind of feel like when you launch a new cryptocurrency,
Hmm.
and we'll keep picking on Ethereum and Vitalik,
Yeah.
but all you've done, like the Ethereum Foundation, in my opinion, now is just the Federal Reserve for Ethereum. And
Mm.
Vitalik, in essence, is just Jerome Powell
Yeah.
with like more power and control, to be quite honest with you. So I just don't understand. And there could just be the potential that some of these people don't really understand and don't agree with the idea of abolishing the Fed, or don't see the necessity of doing things like that.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's the case. Like, that's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah.
But if that's what you believe in and that's what you want to push for, I'm curious as to why you would then just want to replace the Fed with potentially a worse version of it.
Yeah. I can't argue that at all. Like I totally agree with you. I don't know. Yeah. It's I think the other side there too is like, if you are a Fed, if you're the Feds, and if you're looking for other ways to transact, and I don't know. I don't. Anytime I think of the federal government, I don't think of honest transparency. And so, but I think if you're looking for lightweight speed and ways to perhaps improve transactions, whether it's I don't know. I don't have a really good answer on that necessarily, but I do agree with the fact that you're replacing one poor system with perhaps another system that's controlled by one central entity. In my opinion, that can be changed literally in 5 minutes from now, right? Like that's where the argument for Bitcoin comes in, and that's why I avoid that. But I mean, do I hold ETH? Sure, probably because I have some transactions that I do and that require it, and that's the thing. Like, if they've created so many strings with Ethereum, it's hard to decouple yourself as a degenerate, you know? Um,
Fair. I mean, I sometimes, like, I was shamed on this show and throughout Bitcoin Magazine conversation so much that I did eventually sell all my ETH stack. So I have nothing but corn.
yeah,
And actually, that's not true. I lost it all in a boating accident. True
it's
story. Um, but like, I just feel like there's a lot of nonsense built on top of ETH that
Mm,
when the nonsense goes and then all the value propositions that maybe do stick around are
yep.
then quickly recognized to require something like proof of work. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, where can we go to build this on proof of work? We'll just go build this on Bitcoin. That that's just one man's opinion. If I'm so spot on and accurate with that, like
Yeah.
honestly, I should buy a lottery ticket. My buddy told me last night we were going through like all of my close calls with like COVID, where like I was in situations where everyone around me ended up getting COVID, and I just would never test positive, and I've never tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
And
You can't
we
test
talked.
positive if you don't get tested.
This is true. This is very true. But I did get tested. I live with my older parents. I do want to see them see their grandchildren one day. Um, but they my buddy put it like this. He was like, dude, the amount of close calls you've had and the odds of you just having never gotten it, like you might as well just go buy a fucking lottery ticket with those odds.
Yeah, really.
But um I want to take a question from the chat because it has me cracking up.
Okay.
Um I can't pull it up on the screen, but I will read it and I will preface this. So if you don't know Lord Norris, like
Uh-oh.
you should give Lord Norris a follow on Twitter. He is arguably one of the funniest shit posters out
Oh,
there.
dude.
Um, Also, if you are a single guy and need advice on like how to talk to and date women, like Eric, how many girlfriends do you have right now?
I it's what hour is it? It's 2 o'clock. So no. Um, I just make claims to all of them until they give in. Like that's all. Like I'm just waiting
You
for one
really
to give in.
do. It's honestly impressive. What was the other day? I saw Haley like sent a tweet being like, "Did you just break up with me via tweet?" And I was like, "Oh my god, I love this for him."
Yeah, it's
Um,
a love-hate relationship.
Definitely a lot more hate from
More
one
hate.
direction.
The love only goes one way. I literally
Exactly.
out, nothing comes back.
Definitely not. Um, but from RDBTC,
Oh
how much
God.
you already
Already.
know.
Yeah.
How much Bitcoin does he need or she to attract wine moms?
That's like an inside joke he's not allowed to bring out. But yeah.
Well, it's
That's
just like, do I need more than one or less than one?
no, you just need to get off zero.
Get off. Ooh,
Get off zero.
ooh,
I'm
ooh. All
crying.
right.
Yeah, if you and that's all you can say. Like wine moms don't care about how much Bitcoin you have. Like if you just own Bitcoin and you can go out to you know to the wine shop and you mentioned you're a Bitcoin holder. Bottles are coming. They're going to start flowing. Like
Now, are these moms buying you the bottles or are you picking up the tab?
absolutely, I have to buy.
Damn.
It's not these wine moms they're smart. They've evolved. They're very smart.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. I want to hear your most absurd date story ever.
Oh my gosh. This is you got it. All right. I'll share if you share.
Absolutely. I will absolutely share.
Absurd, huh? Hmm. Would you like? I don't want to. Yeah,
Like
like with Natalie or
let's laugh.
Haley. No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
let's laugh. I want it to be a funny story, not a sad story.
I don't know if. Let me try to think here. Something that's won't get you banned. Um, uh, dude, I don't know. Laughing. I think they've all been pretty good. I think I'm pretty good at due diligence. I think, although it's there. There's I think there's points in every guy's life where you're really bored, and maybe it's like, okay, they have a heartbeat and they're showing me attention. I'll go out, and
All right,
then
so
like you quickly regret it. Like after your
have you
testosterone comes down a little bit, you're like, what was I thinking? Like if my boy sees me out right now, this is like this is not good. Um, I don't know. I think mine are sad. I don't think I have a funny absurd date. as much as I'd
I
want to share, but I don't know if I have a funny one.
I have a lame one where a girl I went on a date with in high school, like, didn't recognize her on Tinder. Like, I didn't go to high school with her, she went to a different high school, but I didn't recognize her on Tinder. We
Yeah.
matched, we went out on a date, and the whole date, I'm sitting there, I'm like, "Dude, why are you familiar? Why are you familiar? Why are you so familiar?" And I was fully convinced that she was a porn star because she was, like, making those, like, weird,
Yeah.
uh, comments. Like, okay, the checklist, if you ever come to LA
Yeah.
and you talk to a girl and
Yeah.
she says, Andrea, I'm not talking about you, I swear. But if she says things like, I work in the film industry, I live in the valley,
Oh, jeez.
uh, like, like,
Red flags, red flags.
like those two alone are red flag, red flag. And
She's a
then,
10, but she works in the adult film industry.
well, the truth is there are studios that are like on the precipice of the valley, like over in like Burbank.
Yeah.
But if you're like deep in the valley, then you're deep
Yeah.
into deep into the adult film industry. But I like in the middle of this day, I'm thinking, oh, I'm on a date with a porn star. And I was a little drunk. I asked her and she was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Like, no. I was like, "I'm so sorry. Like, you just look so familiar and I couldn't figure it out. And some of the things you said like made me think that."
Yeah.
And then as we started digging and I'm like, where'd you grow up? I was like, "Oh, you're from my part. Wait, oh my God, we did this date like
Oh my God.
senior year." Like, yeah. So
That's
that was really funny.
I think that, well, like I'm in Raleigh, and so the town is not as huge. So this story might make a little more sense. But recently, I had matched with somebody, started talking to them for several days, and then actually noticed in group photos like her best friend was somebody else that I had dated, and that's a I so that's I've added that to my due diligence. Like, let's make sure like not in the same friend circle.
You know what's
Yeah.
weird?
You don't get that
And
in LA. Like LA is probably like it's a massive pasture.
I
You're not gonna
mean,
run.
you don't, but I've seen situations where people date like friends' exes and stuff, and I'm
Ooh,
always just like, "You guys are weird. You
yeah,
guys are so weird."
that's my first questions right now. Like, hey, do you have a hotter friend, or do you have a sister that's hotter? Like, before we go down this path, like I just need to know. Can you send me a photo of your friends? But what I'm really doing is making sure I haven't dated one of their friends. Like that's
How often do you get slapped or have
follow
drinks
me
thrown
for
in your
more
face?
advice.
Like, honestly, at
No, I don't
at
go.
the Eric Norris, you should absolutely follow him because it's just he is a professional shit poster. He
Mm.
truly is. But um
I'm just trying to
eh,
help my fellow kings. Like that's I'll avoid traps. Um, live a better free life.
all right, last thing and then we'll get back to serious conversation.
Okay.
But one piece of dating advice to the young kings out there.
Ooh, dating advice. I think, um, hmm, one piece of dating advice I would say is be honest. I think most guys probably underestimate that there's somebody that will meet them where they're at in life, and I think like people come in your life to you know, I think the universe, and I may get off board here, whatever, but I think the universe will bring people together in your life, and that could be for 2 weeks or for 6 months or for 60 years, right? And I think that that develops organically. But I think don't underestimate that there's somebody that will match with you, that will meet you, not figuratively, where you're at in life. And because I think a lot of guys will put on fronts, they'll try to change who they are. I've been guilty of that, right? And try to put themselves in a different spot and not be honest with themselves. And then so they project that, and then when conversations start happening, things start evolving, then the real them naturally comes out, and then they find themselves not being kind of like connected, and it goes both ways, right? But yeah, I think that's probably my biggest piece of advice. Did you want a funny piece of advice, or
I was so surprised that that was like legit, real, genuine. I was like fucking
yeah.
expecting one of your like classic lines.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, like,
Like, give me a
um,
classic line for the sake of it, but like also I
yeah,
love
like wait
that.
till the third sentence to send a dick pic. Is that like, yeah, like hi, hello, like yeah. I don't know. I think yeah, it's I think there's probably more frustration on my end from that, from like the just dating and intros and chats. Like, everyone's like robots. They want to interview each other. Like, just get it back to being having fun. And for dudes, like I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I'm giving you a serious one again, but like at the end of the day, girls want to have fun, and I mean that like in all aspects. Like, just just be fun, and like don't worry about everything else. Like, just have a good time, be respectful, all that good stuff. Have fun. The basis, just have fun.
Just make a girl laugh, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no reason an ugly guy like me should be batting as high above my weight
And
class as
I'm
I am.
I'm also assuming that your audience is straight. Like we're saying, guys and girls. So it's probably a good mix with your fans.
Well, I'm never gonna recover from that one.
I'll
So
let you I'll let you talk on that side though if you want.
fuck you. I mean, look, uh, all love is love, baby.
Yeah, we're totally getting canceled. All right.
I mean, all right. This
Okay.
this actually weirdly will let me segue into it, but like,
Okay.
look, right now there is a growing perception of what a Bitcoiner is, and it's
Mhm.
growing into this to some media outlets. I'm not saying this is what I believe. I just see it depicted from certain outlets in this way where Bitcoiners are these crazy psychopath anti-state people who tend to lean like farther right than even some typical Republicans might.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's starting to turn into this like, well, it's a Republican thing now. Look, I'm an independent again. Thank God I'm back to being an independent. Um, but like I've got plenty of friends who are registered Democrats who are Bitcoiners. I recently had a conversation and uh we'll be going on a podcast that I will not shut up about once it gets booked. But like the conversation I had was what I said earlier about how like I voted for Bernie Sanders. Like I know that
Yeah.
like Bitcoin like revolt against me when they hear that. And the statement made back to me was you'd actually be surprised by how many there are. Like there's actually a very silent majority of left and more left, more progressive minded Bitcoiners who
Hmm.
don't fit that mold. And I wonder if part of it is because, you know, the loudest people in the room right now are the people who sort of are on that side.
Yeah.
Um, but as the title suggests, Bitcoin is for enemies. And even if it's someone who sees something on the opposite end of the political spectrum as you, they are just as entitled to Bitcoin as you are, and they can use Bitcoin just as you can. Um, and I wonder if this polarization and the political spectrum that has now started to enter the Bitcoin space could actually be harmful for the adoption of Bitcoin. Maybe only in the short and medium term. Maybe in the long term, it's like Thanos and Bitcoin is inevitable, and everything just will bend the knee to Bitcoin. But in this sort of intermediary, as we transition to it, do you think something like the polarization of politics that has entered the Bitcoin space will be a factor to inhibit Bitcoin adoption?
Hmm. I, I think it'll grow adoption. I think it will grow regulation at the same time in that sense. Like I think that's the fallback for that. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like I think the initial perception is, oh, you're a Bitcoin, like you are extreme anti-state, and there probably should be an element of that, right? Like even if you're left, right, like which is kind of confusing for me, like ultra liberal Bitcoin folks, like it just doesn't make sense to me that they could be pro government and pro Bitcoin at the same time. Like it's interesting, and especially like I love to take that path down, like of regulation of all things and power and control. Like that's to me, it's weird. And I'm with you. I'm independent. I come across, people will put me in that conservative right box because I love freedom, guns in America. Like, you know, it's wild. Like you could say that to a lot of people, and and I'll be flagged as, oh, you voted for Trump and you're racist, like because you like freedom, guns, and like and anti-government, like, and it's like, whoa, like that's because that's the problem in society. We all want to put each other in boxes, but that's why I really want to zoom out. And I go back to that football analogy, right? Like I want to zoom out. Like everybody fight over each other. Let's go kill each other in the streets. Like we're not accomplishing anything. Bitcoin accomplishes it, and we gotta take ourselves out from it. But so I think it's kind of like a two-folded answer. Does it inhibit adoption? On one end, I think it does. One end, I think it doesn't. I think with adoption through politics comes more regulation. I think it was really bold, and I know we were all really pushing it when you saw. I don't know how many mayors we're up to now on getting who are receiving paychecks in Bitcoin.
I think it was like 6. No, 5.
Yeah,
maybe
5.
6.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of noise, makes a lot of racket. But man, that's a quick way for the White House to be like, okay, whoa, let's like, how are we making sure we get our fair share out of this? And we need to act fast because this is a train that's going down, right? So kind of back to like my argument of like, I'd rather this be alternative and rather this not be so mainstream, because I think at the end of the day, we all can benefit and win from it as it is today. Sure, we want all our friends, the people that we care about, and hey, even our enemies to invest in it. However, at the same time, we want to kind of walk that fine line, and that's why I'm here to say I'm not necessarily pro U.S. tender in the U.S. For Bitcoin, that is. But that's kind of my take on it.
No, that's fair. I'm going to keep us zoomed in, so now you can just like really see how much better looking I am than Lord Norris.
Oh, I gotta take a photo of this because this is just. How can I take a photo? Can I take a selfie with us?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're not wrong, and I wish I had just the clip on hand, but I remember after the presidential election, there was a clip that came out of Kamala Harris entering wherever all the senators sit in that room, and she walks in, and Lindsey Graham, who I think is the most spineless snake out there. Mm-hmm. Like Lindsey Graham is like the worst. Like I hate Lindsey Graham more than I hate Ted Cruz, and I hate Nancy Pelosi. Like that is the realm of people that I despise. Yeah. Is like the Nancy Pelosi's and the Lindsey Grahams, just spineless cuck. And they were like fist bumping and like, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, that's right, because they probably go to the same country club, or like they like have had dinners and lunches together. Like they're in a different circle and club. And
that's like, yeah, like I'm with you. I went to the county here, the GOP event for North Carolina, and I was invited to. I was asked to run marketing for a congresswoman, and so I just went to kind of like I wanted to entrench myself in it, right? And I want to be open-minded, and that was probably one of the most eye-opening events I've been to politically, as well as just dude, I walked away. So like, I walked away freaked out, just seeing how these politicians are all robots. Like if you don't fall into their bullet points and their game plan, you will be excommunicated from the GOP. Like it's wild. I mean, we're talking everything. I mean, I would walk up to these candidates and ask them different things like, hey, how are you going to help small business? How are you going to, what's up with our economy? What do you think is this? You know what I mean? And it's just like, they take the same fact sheet and they come back and it's like, Jesus, dude, you guys aren't thinking for yourself. And and you start challenging them. They're like, yeah, well, I can't really say those things on stage because then I'm going to lose my financial support. So I got to go along with things. And so that's where I love getting into somebody who's like a super liberal. I'm like, look, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. If you want to put me in that GOP box, like, look, I'm here to tell you, I went in that world and I walked out scared as hell thinking we have no control. Like our votes are just going to the people that are doing the same shit over and over again. And like the person that stands out, right? Maybe like a Bernie, right? Or anybody who stands out against those things, you're like, shit, they're never going to stand a chance, man.
Totally.
Bernie never
I
win.
mean,
He'll never win.
to even like strengthen what you're talking about, there's an old saying that I remember a Republican friend of mine told me after the 2016 election, and it's Republican or Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. And what
Mm,
he meant by that was he meant in the context of candidates and policy, where Democrats will fall in love with a certain candidate. In 2008, it was Barack Obama. In 2016, it was Bernie Sanders. But then when they don't get that candidate, they don't care to continue sort of the
mm,
process of voting forward for those ideas
yeah.
versus Republicans. And I don't care what you think, but if you don't think that Republicans literally fall in line, you're
Hmm.
wrong. And I will provide two perfect, honestly, more than two, but I will provide you the examples. First, in 2016, Donald Trump called Ted Cruz's wife ugly. He called him the son of the Zodiac killer, accused him of being the Zodiac killer. He, during the GOP primaries, bashed, berated, and attacked Lindsey Graham, released Lindsey Graham's cell phone number to the public to the point where Lindsey Graham had to change his cell phone number.
Yeah.
Those two gentlemen became some of Trump's strongest supporters the moment he received the GOP nomination. I'm sorry, but that's pretty spineless if you ask me. Then there was the nomination of Justice Kavanaugh. And up until that point, I will be honest, I had never voted just one party line on an election.
Hmm.
And I think the way I saw that handled and the people around me and the conversations that I had, it it was a very disappointing system to just see, oh, all the Republicans just yet again fell in line. However, you believe, whatever you believe about the way that happened, you are entitled to that belief. I just simply want to point out that instead of any real thoughtful conversation, pushback, or dialogue around these topics, the Republicans all just fell in line. And that is dangerous to your point, as you bring up, like these politicians who are just like, no, you know what? I believe that. Like what you're telling me, I do believe it, but I
Hmm.
will lose my job if I say those. That's a dangerous thing because now we're no longer putting forward people with values. We're
Hmm.
simply propagating the ideas of people in powers that, like, I don't decide who's in charge of the GOP. I don't. I don't
Right.
decide who's in charge of the DNC. Like it's this is crazy. This is
Yeah.
truly it's gotten to a point where we've lost the plot. Um,
Well, I'm with you. I don't mean to cut you off too, but it's just it's so powerful, especially when you see the way fundraising works and for the people that are picked and the endorsements in today's world. It is God, dude, it's so bad. Like the candidates here in North Carolina that I was potentially going to go against, and I mean, it's when you see them get endorsements. Like, for example, I was very privy to Trump's endorsements, kind of here in the southeast, and these are people you're talking who he never even spoke to. Like Trump never talked to these folks, and he's coming out and putting endorsements out, and it comes down to like it's money, right? Everything's money, and these guys no clue what they're really standing for as long as they get the green light from the GOP. The GOP says, "Hey, Trump, this is the guy you need to say give the thumbs up to because he's the safest choice," right? And they're going to protect our Bible. And man, when you see that happen in real life, and then you're fighting for somebody who's like, coming from a communist country who cares about freedom and sees all this shit that's going on and like wants to stand up for that, whew, never going to win. You're never going to win. So
it's so sad how people have been brainwashed.
yeah, and I mean, and that goes on both sides, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's tough. So like for me, when I see like I take this perspective, and then I go on Twitter and I see somebody like, oh, we are the leftist revolution of Bitcoin, and then I see that we are the right conservative. I'm like, guys, you guys are all like, you're fighting for somebody who doesn't give a shit about what you think, honestly, because they're going to do whatever they want. And so that's where I kind of want to, as an independent, I want to set myself apart from that. And that falls right in line. That's why I think you go to a Bitcoin conference, we talk about all these things. Like you're surrounded by people who may lean different directions politically for whatever reason. And I think it boils down to what impacts you, right? Like you have your passions and what you believe in, basically, but that it's based on what's has impacted you in your life or what may impact you in the future. And so that's
Absolutely.
why I love meeting everybody, no matter where they stand on. I'm never gonna like not want to talk to somebody because they have different views of me. Hey, look, change my mind on anything. Like I'm open to it. But look, my family came from Cuba. They got to, I got to see and hear stories of everything that happened there. And so when I'm here, like so immigration is a topic that it probably impacts me more than Billy down the street who's lived in North Carolina his whole life for the last his family. So that's
Oh,
why I think everybody gets riled up, but we lose sight of the big picture. So I think if there's somewhere I can go on, I don't know, if that's my message to the world, like zoom out, right? Freaking zoom out.
no, I think you hit the head on the nail there. Like, we're allowed to disagree with each other.
Mhm.
You're allowed to literally think the exact opposite of me, especially given the fact that you have not lived my life and I nor have I lived yours. And again, there's this lack of respect over this idea of my opinions are just that, they're opinions. Nothing I believe is actually a fact. Like, I'm one of those crazy people who thinks we live in a simulation. And when I think of life through that scope and I kind of recognize, like, oh, what I see and how I see it, how I absorb life is just my bias, my tint on the world. You could literally be standing right where I'm standing and you will see different things just because that is who you are. And that's the beautiful thing about life. Um, I talk a ton about weed. I smoke a ton of weed. I'm a huge psychedelics fan. And I had this conversation recently with a friend where I was like, my whole perspective on the world, like I can literally point to and be like, oh, before I took my first ever trip and after, I see the world differently. You open your eyes to the idea that there's more than just the one or two ways you see the world. There are actually infinite ways to interpret it. Um, and I read this quote that I thought was fascinating. I'm going to butcher it because the book is in my bedroom. Um, but it essentially goes something along the lines of like, we are not what we are not who we think we are. We are who we think other people think that we are. And that's like such a crazy concept because we we've like lost sight of what our personal perspective is sometimes. I don't know. I'm rambling again. I'm going to bring it back to Bitcoin. Um,
I got a question in the chat.
oh, hit me.
What's the biggest risk to Bitcoin you see in the next 6 months?
Oh, in the next 6 months, I would say some sort of a state-led attack, some sort of policy measure that is not fully thought through. Um, I think in the next 6 months, that is a genuine potential thing to obstruct Bitcoin. And that could
Yeah.
be across the spectrum of banning transactions they won't do, banning mining outright they won't do, to little things like trying to phase out proof of work, which I think is a very scary and real possibility. Um,
Do you think this is going to be? I'm curious. Do you think this next major election round, like, do you see Bitcoin being any kind of topic of that? Or are we still too early for that? You think?
like this upcoming midterms in 2 months,
Yeah.
I think in a handful of races, but not enough to where it tips the scale on the
Mm,
national sense. Like, there might be a politician running for a like congressional seat in DC or a Senate seat in DC that may
yeah.
run and say some stuff about Bitcoin. And there will definitely be state legislators that will run on Bitcoin platforms, whether they say positive or negative things about it. Um, I'm in the camp that thinks in 2024 the president is going to talk about crypto.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I definitely am in the camp that it's going to be DeSantis and Newsom. So that means that one, if not both of them, will not actually end up being the nominee for president because there's no way I get those picks right. Um, and both of them have pushed forward crypto oriented legislation in their respective states.
yeah.
They've both accepted money from crypto businesses. So this tells me that if those are literally the Democrat and Republican running for president, crypto is on the national stage by 2024.
Hmm. Which would
But
be big. Yeah.
I'll I'll
Yeah.
I'll be really easy, lame and simple and just toss the questions right back to you of like next 6 months, what is the biggest thing that you worry about for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think I know it almost for me, it's like it's not necessarily Bitcoin itself. I think it's the market, right? I think the next 6 months is going to be. I'm really, I mean, everybody, right? And I think that's where I'm also really grateful and blessed to be in this like bubble of crazy Bitcoin world because I think we get to stay ahead of the markets. I think most of the world didn't foresee like where we're at today going to happen, but anyways, I think the next 6 months it's really overall the market, right? Like as much as we hate to say it, it's still correlated to the condition of everything, right? And supply chain, just our traditional trading markets and so on. So for me, it's all argued if we're living in a recession today, if we're not, if it's coming, what does that look for? But I don't think we've seen hardly any of the consequences from all the money printing, all the stuff going overseas yet, and supply chains truly be broken. And I think in the next 6 months, there's going to be a bit of a squeeze on that, and whatever happens to the market, Bitcoin's gonna, it's gonna have a short term impact on it. How much that goes, I don't know. I kind of like in the back of my head spiraling around too is like what happens to these Bitcoin mining companies. A lot of them have been really hurt the last 12 months, as much as we want to, admit that, and they've gotten weakened. Like, there's layoffs and there's going out of business, and just look at what they're trading. It's taken the market's taken, yeah. And look, let's zoom out. This is a short term blip in the radar, if we're talking the 10-year, 20-year span. But yeah, so I mean, I think we're still on that decline. And for the way I look at it, the next 6 months is I look at it as buying opportunities, really, for Bitcoin and to be able to stack more. I don't think I'm still a little I'm short term a little bearish on Bitcoin because of that. So the next 6 months, I think we'll see a little downward channel on it some, and then but nonetheless, I think we'll be in that 15 to 20 range for another year and a half, year and a half. I don't I think you got a lot going on, midterm elections, this state of our economy, things like that. So where people are going to be figured out. I think a lot of we're really cash heavy as a society right now. I think it's scared. A lot of people are scared to be trading. A lot of people are, it's kind of those dark ages of the bull market, right? And it's so funny how Twitter evolves overnight from bear to bull market, and the stories you heard when we were, I still have my laser eyes, right? Like we're still going to 100,000,
I
and
still do. I put a new profile picture on and I made sure to put the laser eyes
nice.
on it.
Stay strong. We're the only ones. Like we're unicorns, bro. And maybe don't go around LA saying you're a unicorn, but you might pick up the wrong crowd. But
Honestly,
anyway,
people in LA will love that.
yeah, your kind of people, yeah. So yeah.
It's interesting you bring up macro. I've been trying to avoid the macro conversations, but I live for them.
I know I'm scared to have it with you.
No, I mean, let's start with this. So inflation has two levers that can be pulled: to supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think personally that inflation is caused 100% by the demand increase. I do think there are supply chain issues, as you highlighted, we've heard about over 2 years. Personally, I've put the ratio of how much of a ratio of 100% of supply to demand. Personally, I'd say it's about 25% supply, 75% demand that has driven inflation. What would be your I'm just guesstimate. This is not like I've like done due diligence, like dive into like actually like numerically, like, no, I pulled those figures out of my ass because that's why it's 25 and 75. What is your best guess? What is your estimate?
You're saying 75 supply?
75% of inflation is caused by demand, 25% being caused by supply.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I could agree with that.
Are there certain things that you're paying attention to, like price wise? Other
Um,
than obviously getting some Bitcoin for under sub 20K. Um, Although again, not financial advice. Like we don't actually know or like I have a thesis that I think Bitcoin will actually go below that, but remains to be
yeah.
seen. Do your own due diligence, do your own research. If you want to know where I'm deriving my thesis, go look up what Elliott waves are. It'll be really
Mhm.
helpful to help you map this out.
Something I'm
Um,
watching outside of Bitcoin, or just like
yeah,
from the on the economy. Like, I mean, just because of um, what I do behind the scenes, like I definitely am i- importation of goods. Like that's you talk. I know earlier you talked about Nvidia and right and chips and things like that, but it actually it's been on my radar since since Trump's tariffs went into play, and the increase of shipping goods in here. I mean, I think that for me started a lot of it created a lot of challenges, right? So you're talking about something that took, if you're shipping a pallet from China 4 years ago that used to cost you maybe $1,000, $1,200. You're looking at now with tariffs that are still into play, demand, shipping, inflation. You're talking something that used to cost $1,000 that's now $2,500, and that's real. We're real. This is real talk. And so you take that to small, medium-sized businesses in the U.S. Like that's a quick way to for inflation, right? And increase costs and services, and where people don't understand, they're like, geez, anything and everything, right? Like you're talking about uh, to paint your house used to cost, you could get away with $2,000. It's $4 or $5,000 now. There's so many things. So for me, like I'm watching that, and I think come midterms, I'm really curious to see if what if this gets any attention, things like that. So, yeah, that's a big deal. I think it impacts a lot of businesses that we don't know. I think you'll see some things pop up on the radar with boats sitting in the water that are waiting to port. And yeah, it's important to track. I don't know how much that is true. When you see those 10,000 boats sitting at port off the U.S. coast, geez, I don't know. Take it at face value, I guess, but. Yeah, for me, that's when we talk about the economy and things coming in, it's a big concern for me.
dude, Long Beach is literally like the port of Long Beach is a 25 minute drive from where I live in LA. And it was crazy during that period where the ships were just all over the
Yeah,
bay and in the ocean. Dude, like the part of I live on a peninsula and it literally I see that is LA over there. Long Beach over there. I can't even see Long Beach. So I don't really see these cargo ships when they come in.
yeah,
Dude, when I tell you there's a giant bay where like the north end is Malibu, you go down to Santa Monica, then the South Bay. Like this is Los Angeles, the ocean of Los Angeles. Covered. Like you couldn't go more than like a 5-degree turn and you would just constantly see cargo ship. It was nuts. Like it was overwhelming and nerve wracking. They had to pass a lot of laws over in Long Beach to allow for the cargo ships to unload containers at a much faster rate. Like there was a whole bunch of random weird things going on, but it's been a nightmare to say the least. Um,
yeah. It's well, I think, and then you keep running with that, right? You're like shit, and then the stuff they did with the truckers, and like you're like, this is
well,
scary. This is like scary for me.
there's also, and this is something that I keep waiting for the other shoe of this to drop, and I'm starting to feel like I'm gonna sound like an egotistical asshole when I say it like this, but I'm starting to feel like Michael Burry, who's
Mhm.
like making the call on the crash the housing market, but he did it like way too early, and all of a sudden, like it finally works out. And I've been saying like, the rising cost of fuel has not changed the cost of your goods yet. Like those cost of goods prices, like the inflation we saw in food, for example, that was happening before the price of fuel started going up. So we still haven't seen the spillover effects of these high gas and fuel prices. And
Yeah,
so I'm genuinely concerned that like inflation will then start picking up in other areas despite maybe like a decrease in gas. I'm interested to see, I think, the next month's inflation reading. I'm interested to see the next, like, 6 months. I read something interesting. I forget I forget now which block of time it was, but during a period of inflation, there were 6 months of consecutive decreasing inflation before the new highs were hit. So seeing something like that, that's like, okay,
Yeah.
we could literally go to the end of 2022, continue to see decreasing inflation, and still have the potential for it to turn around at the top of the year and just shoot right back up.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and I,
and I almost would like to say, like, you talked about the two levers for inflation, right? You've got supply and demand. I almost want to put in, like, I think I want to make a meme of this, of like a third lever being mainstream media, right? Like, I, nothing, right? And say you run an apartment building, you know absolutely nothing about supply, demand. You turn the news on, you hear record inflation today, 9.8%, rent increases like crazy. And what do you do as a property manager? You go back to your office in the morning and you go, we're raising our rates 5%. And supply demand didn't change at all. Literally, it's the buzz. It's us talking about it. It's what you saw on business show, and I think that's what happens because I was impacted by it. I went to my property manager. I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, well, you didn't see the news, inflation. They didn't talk about, like, well, we have less apartments, we got more people trying to move in. Like, it was, I saw the news, it went up 10%, so we could charge more, 5 more percent. And it's literally like it's that media lever, which I think is the unspoken figurative lever there. But I think it goes back to, I think it's like kind of what you just said. Like, I'm interested of the what the rate comes out, right? Because you're probably more from a macro, you're like, this is going to have an impact on the markets, things like that when they see that. But I think real world boots on the ground, it hits real world America before, like you said, we haven't seen the impacts of this. But geez, it goes from the news to my grocery store faster than anything else. Like,
dude, the cost of food is just getting so out of hand, and it's that, that old saying that I brought up countless times on this show. Like, you're 3 meals away from a revolution.
mm,
Like, it's all we
I
really
like that.
are. And we were having this conversation. So I'm gonna dox my mom a little bit, but my mom works at Macy's. She just, sales lady on the floor, and she's been complaining a lot about the robberies and specifically how, like, race Macy's has been getting robbed a lot more recently, and it's like gotten to a point where, she won't give her clients who buy, like, really expensive jewelry from her, she won't give them, like, the jewelry bags to help them hide it out of fear of them getting jumped when they walk outside. And
Yeah,
then, like, there's another tidbit of information that, like, Macy's security guards are not allowed to put their hands on someone, even if they're, like, trying to rob the place.
yeah,
And these robbers now know it, so they have no shame. Like, people are literally jumping over the counters, going into, like, the private area for these employees and just grabbing bags out of there and then just walking right out.
yeah,
Some guy apparently walked in with a fucking black trash bag and just was like, cut the thing on all of the purses, went over to the sunglass area, put all the sunglasses, and just, like, no one stopped him. Like,
that's a
employees were
great
taking
business.
video.
Low overhead business to go just steal stuff, like, and
But,
resell it.
like,
Yeah,
but and but the thing for me, the way I'm reading this is, the situation has gotten so bad for people that this is how they think that this is the only way I'm gonna be able to put food on the table for my family.
yeah,
Look, sure, there are some people who are doing this because they're just, really shitty people.
mhm,
Um, but there's a degree in which I believe the increased rate of these crimes can also be drawn proportionally to the increase in the price of just necessities now. Um, I think where it will worry me is when people start to have more audacity to start going into people's homes.
mm,
Um, I'm gonna be crass when I say it like this. Like, I do not support crime, robbery. I think it's stupid. Don't do it. Crime does not pay. Like, I'm a big
yeah,
believer in karma. Um, but I also, like my dad and I have had the conversation with my mom where it's like, do not get involved. Like,
yeah,
these aren't your things. Like, this is Macy's. Like, Macy's is going to be just fine. They have insurance on this. They will be just fine. But you do not need to get involved for the sake of your safety. And I hope all these businesses that, like, dude, the reports come out of LA a lot. Like, we see these things. Like, I see firsthand these stories of people just getting jumped, robbed all the time. Um, but I think when we start seeing more reports of people breaking into other people's homes, that's when I think that's going to be the time for me that like we've really lost the plot, and
Yeah.
it's gotten really difficult for people that's what they're measuring as the best source of an income. And
Hmm.
and part of it, and you know what, I'll say, like, I think all the stimulus is stupid, and I think people did get a little too accustomed to an unemployment check that, like, I will never forget when I first got laid off and I got my first unemployment check, and it was more than my salary as a full-time second year agent.
Yeah.
It floored me that wow, I was being paid that little. The money was, like, besides the point though. Um, like, those little things I think ultimately will lead to more crime, but it's when the crime shifts from the businesses to the individuals. I do hope all these criminals end up just going and buying Bitcoin.
That's right.
Oh, that reminded me. It triggered me about how yesterday we had the conversation about Bitcoiners. Like, if you're a criminal, like, using Bitcoin is the stupidest thing you can do, in my opinion, because it's a public ledger.
Right.
Um, I want to talk about the campaign financing that you actually brought up, because
Mm.
I've long actually believed that if on the political stage and even just our US government were to use Bitcoin, then we can at least see the transaction. We can see where this money is coming from and going out to. Whereas right now, it's the government that gets to control and dictate sort of whose transactions are going to be shared and what information about the transaction gets shared. Like, they control that. So when we ask them, like, hey, can we know, like, what happened to the $1 billion right after 9/11 that just disappeared? Like, we don't talk about that a whole lot. I actually think it was $1 trillion then. There was a very large number that was more than a billion, either a trillion. It was either a billion or a trillion, where the U.S. government just lost this money, and no
Yeah.
one ever, like, had an answer of, like, where it went. Well, guess what solves
Uh-huh.
that? Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin literally would be like, nope, you actually sent this money to, like, these accounts, and these accounts just turn out to be, oh, interesting. So, I'm not going to go down those rabbit holes. We did the well, honestly, I don't really care. It's a Q show today, so we'll talk about whatever the fuck I want.
Right.
Um, what is your
So
favorite?
well,
Oh, go ahead.
I could tell you on that. Like one of the challenges, like because we were trying to accept Bitcoin for campaign that I was going to be a part of. I never officially did, but we had conversations, and one of the big challenges was if you're a donor, and say for example you donate $1,000, and Bitcoin is one Bitcoin is at $20,000, and at the end of the campaign, if Bitcoin is at $40,000, and that $1,000 you donated is now worth 4 grand, basically. I don't know if I did the math there. I don't cancel me if I did, but so right, if your Bitcoin is increased in value that you donated at the initial time of your donation, and when the campaign is over, and if that politician were to return, that's the question: what do you do with these funds now, right? And they're also fully tracked, right? So if you have everything tracked, that politician received $10 million in donations, and now you've got a ledger that shows you spent $7 million. What happens to that other $3 million? Today, in legacy world, that politician's buying a new house in LA, baby, looking at ships in the port. But if that's all in a ledger, and you've got a bunch of degenerates who will spend time making a Twitter thread of like every purchase this politician's made, and hey, where's the $3 million of that that money? Anyway, so that's one element of what happens. What do you do with that? I guess that that increase or even decrease, right? So hey, I gave you I gave you $10,000, and now it's only worth $5,000. And now, so do I take the hit of that when the campaign's over? I don't know. And then also, so there's a lot of things that make it difficult to accept Bitcoin as a politician. I think it's a business opportunity for somebody to figure out and be able to kind of hold, manage, and then distribute accordingly. But it's tricky a lot, as much as I think Ted Cruz probably will go out next campaign. I think he already. I think he currently maybe accepts Bitcoin, but it's going to be. I think the risk is on the politician as well, because what happens if your campaign fund goes down 40% in a week? Like that's hard to operate on.
You brought up Ted Cruz, so I'm gonna bring up Ted Cruz now.
Yeah,
Do you think that Ted Cruz is actually a net positive for Bitcoin?
for votes. I think he's in it for votes. Yeah,
I knew
yeah,
we're
yeah,
we're, we're one of the same. I appreciate you. I mean, I've said it time and time again. Ted Cruz is the biggest grifter out
yeah,
there. Um,
yeah. And I
I
mean,
want
I
to
think
ask.
you'll see other. I think that maybe not so, yeah, probably in the midterm, but I think you're going to see other people jump on the train, and they're going to see the exposure that it's gained him in the Bitcoin community and different, like a lot of voters, and you've got these hardcore single voters on Bitcoin. Like you're going to see that's going to catch more attention, and you're going to see more of it. Yeah,
No, that makes sense. I mean, we'll see what happens with the midterms as far as how large of a stage Bitcoin takes. But again, I'm going to reiterate that if it is Newsom versus DeSantis in 2024, like there's no reason that Bitcoin and frankly crypto won't be a talking point, especially in those debates, given that both of them have passed legislation
yeah,
to help those types of businesses in their respective states. Um, Eric,
yeah.
as we wind down here, I want to ask you sort of a couple fun little questions. First
Okay.
things first, Amsterdam. What's your favorite thing to do? What do you think about when you think of Amsterdam?
I think like everybody else thinks about, they think about Q on a beach chair, folding beach chair in the back, smoking a fat J. Like, um, I've actually never been to Amsterdam.
Really, same. So the company won't let me go because they're now afraid that I'll never come back to America.
That's probably fair. That's probably fair. Yeah.
uh,
Is that where the
Eric,
red light district is? Just side note.
yes,
It is. Okay.
yes, yes.
I've heard about that.
It, oh, have you?
Yeah.
Have you? Did you go on one of your famous dates there?
No, I pretty much probably just lost every opportunity for a date just now by saying that. So
It's fine. I'm sure if you ask nicely, Natalie and everyone will forgive you. All of your seven wives.
yeah, we've gotten this far, so they're still holding strong.
Lord Norris, how can everyone stay up to date with your posting and all of your
Yeah,
crazy
it's
antics?
I guess I publicly dox myself, but yeah, it's the Eric Norris at on Twitter. That's yeah. So I'm there. I'm
You
pretty
know
much.
you could change that, right?
I probably should, because you can Google me way too easy and see the stupid stuff.
I mean, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the thread that we made for Eric on like his background, I highly recommend it, especially after a
Yeah,
joint or a beer.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
No, it's
put
really
some
good.
serious work into that.
It's really good. I need to figure out where I can put that, like on a resume or something. Like it's really good. Um, but where are you? Like, what are you doing? Are you are you traveling? Like, weren't I would think you'd be in Austin this week.
No, I just got back from Nashville for 2 weeks. We did a lot of filming for Bitcoin Magazine there. My big
Oh, that's
trips
right. I
at the
think I
end of
saw
the
CK
year.
was there. Right? Were you there with
Yeah.
CK? Okay.
Well, CK, I'll dox this. He lives in Nashville now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know
I'm
that.
I'm not shy about doxing him like that.
Dox me.
But no, I actually I I'll share this news. So I'm going to be going to the World Cup finals, but not just
What?
like a random match. I'm going to the semifinals and the finals.
For
I
gaming? For like Call of Duty?
No, like this, like FIFA World Cup.
Oh, okay.
Like
Nice.
you literally don't care. I'm a
No,
huge
that's awesome.
soccer. I'm
Yeah.
such a soccer fan. Like I played soccer in college. Like love the sport. The World Cup is remarkable. I'm excited. It's a bucket list thing for me. Not cheap, so I canceled all travel for the rest of the year after I got those
Jeez.
tickets. But
Damn.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
How long
hyped.
are you going? Is it a week?
I'm just going for a week, but might do some other traveling since I'm like right there next to the homeland. So might need to pop by to say hello. But Lord Norris, I want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining
Yes, sir.
us. Um, please give him a follow. It's always a good time over on Twitter. Thank you again for joining us, brother.
Yeah, man. See ya.
We're going to go to a quick commercial break. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale now. Use promo code BM Live to get 10% off of those. And the censorship resistant print magazine is available at your local Barnes and Nobles and online. Use promo code BM Live to get 10% off of your new quarterly print magazine subscription. We'll be back in just a moment with Jimmy Song.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Samba.
Thank you all for sticking through those commercial breaks, sticking through all of my technical difficulties. I am excited to introduce our next guest, Jimmy Song. Jimmy, how goes it, my friend?
It goes well. It goes well. Thanks for having me back. It's been a little while.
It has. You've been all over the world. You've been enjoying yourself. I was honestly, I'm grateful you're joining us. I know that your great city is now hosting the the Bitcoin conference of the season, if I may say so. So, tell us where have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, I mean, I went on vacation with my family. Checked out London and Scotland and stuff like that. And I know you're a big soccer fan, so I actually checked. I went to a Premier League game. That was one of my bucket list items, and watched Tottenham destroy Southampton 4-1. So that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Are you a Tottenham fan?
Yeah, I'm Korean, so I have
Fair.
yeah,
Chris is
yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
somewhere in BitBlock Boom hearing this and celebrating. I myself am a very passionate Gooner fan, and we are the best team in the Premier League for good reason right now because we have an easy schedule.
Well, we'll see. I think the derby will be happening soon enough. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, look,
Yeah.
if we didn't score 9 points in those first 3 matches against the quality of teams we played against, that would be more concerning. But
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have to play Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, so yeah. That's all I'll say.
hey,
Yeah.
it's okay. It's a long season. We got 35 more weeks of it. But
Yeah, indeed.
I wanna ask, what are you most looking forward to? Because you're talking a bit Block Boom as well, right?
Yeah. I actually have to go finish my presentation after this, but yeah, mine is titled "Fiat Delenda Est," and I'll pretty much be taking a lot of the articles that I've written over the last, I don't know, 4.5 months for Bitcoin Magazine, and compiling it into some coherent presentation that hopefully makes sense. Yeah, but, I mean, this is the life of every presenter. You procrastinate. You try to do things. It's been percolating. I just have to write it down. Basically, that's it. Yeah.
I feel like at this point, given how many different talks and conversations you've had, like you by saying you're going to prepare, you're literally going to write like 3 bullet points on a note card and like maybe put together a slideshow.
Yeah, something like that. That's
I got
the
faith.
dirty secret of all of these talks is that you put it together at the last minute, and sometimes the thing though is that there's something about performing, right? There's some, and I think anyone that's like given talks or done stuff like this, like or even like the show which is live, there's something magical that happens when you're sort of like forced to confront an audience, and it brings out the best because you have that pressure. So like the thing that like CJ Wilson told me a while back, which I really identify with. He said, we were talking about, how fast is your fastball? And he's like, yeah, 95, 96, something like that. And I'm like, we're like, wow, okay. How, like, can you show us what you would do? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah. And it's like, so when you practice, do you get it there? He's like, no, you don't get 96 miles per hour when you're practicing. We're like, why? Because you don't have the pressure. You need to have some stake to really bring your best fastball. That's what I feel like with these things, is that when you go on stage and when you're really delivering something, the best doesn't come out until you're on that stage because of that pressure. And there's some people that crumble under that pressure. I think for me, I'd like to think that it elevates me when I have an audience, right? Because there's reactions, there's other things, and I know sometimes I bomb, right? Like there are times when I wanted to say something well, and I don't know, maybe I didn't have drink enough coffee or something, but it's just not there. And then there are other times I'm like, I nailed that one, and it's like, and you can feel it, and it's that, which is I can see why like stand-up comics and people like that they get addicted to that audience, right? Like that experience, because in a sense it's like the most real feedback that you're ever going to get, unlike say central bankers or whatever.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I loved that analogy with CJ, and like I would even go so far as to say like something as simple as adrenaline just pumping through your system in the middle of a competition with a crowd screaming behind you, or like having even 100 eyes just listening to what you say, watching everything you do. It makes you either rise to the occasion or crumble and fall. I love that. I'm excited to hear how that goes, but it sounds like it's going to be a lot of our conversation. So how can we help you? What are what are the things that is eating up your mind right now that you're going to inevitably talk about on the stage?
I think everybody agrees that the fiat monetary system is really sucky. And I don't think that's a hard sell, especially to a crowd like at Black Boom. The thing that I think me and almost everybody else that's presenting that you want to do is sort of like take it to the next level, right? Like, how are you going to really communicate this in a way that they can take home and say to other people that will make complete sense and will really sort of like take the narrative to the next place that it needs to go to. Right now I think we've gone on this like long arc of Bitcoin where it started as this sort of like interesting internet currency to savings and store of value, and I think right now it's at this point of it's more moral than the current monetary system. How do you take that next step, right? Like what's the, and that's really where I think this presentation really needs to go is, okay, how do we push the ball forward? Because the narrative's been changing, and I think we've sort of brought the community along into this place where it's, yeah, we do have the moral high ground. How do we keep it? And that's really where it's like, okay, we really have to destroy fiat, and that's the title of my talk is Fiat Delenda Est, and it's a phrase I made up, right? Like, it's really nonsense in Latin because fiat is a verb, and so is est. So you got two verbs and a noun. Whereas in English, it's got like it's like fiat is a noun or an adjective or something like that. So like getting that sort of instilled, that mentality that fiat really needs to be destroyed because it is just so evil. That that we're seeing all of the stuff that's happening right now. And if we successfully pin it on fiat, which I think it deserves, then I think we have something. And I don't know. So that's a tall order for my talk, but that's what I want to do, and hopefully, everyone that's going to be there, you can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for.
No, but that's a really important talk, and I think what you're doing is you're creating this call to action, because we have all the slogans that we all pass around to each other, or say to our friends, or say to friends that we want an orange pill. But at times it feels like we don't really know, is the next push forward supposed to be like from the grassroots of it? Is it supposed to be new technology, new use cases that we create and build? Is it supposed to be something coming out of the legislative area, or how do we move the ball forward? What is that next step? And I'm curious. I threw out two examples out of what could be countless other ways in which we can help expand adoption and push forward Bitcoin. I'm curious where or what your expectations are for like the next 4-year cycle, in essence, and
Mm.
where the biggest push forwards could come from.
Yeah, those are always hard to predict. I mean, we never would have guessed El Salvador 4 years ago, but that's what it became. And that's or Michael Saylor or anything like that. The thing is, the people that adopted are the people you least expect, and they kind of come out of left field. So I don't know, but I do know that it'll be individuals that will be adopting it, and they'll be pushing the ball forward. And what that narrative looks like, or what connects with people, that's a real sort of like market process at play here, because in a sense, like, what we have to do is find the narrative that people can really connect with and really identify with and make sense to them and is true, and really gets them to action, because that's really where we are right now. Is I think we have some level of parity with fiat in sort of like a mental sense. Like, there's no narrative anymore about how, Bitcoin's so evil because it's used as drug money or whatever. I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that fiat money is pretty bad, and it enables a lot of things that that are immoral. So, like, starting to flip that moral high ground, it's now about you know kind of undermining the fiat system and getting to the point where we can really win, right? Like, we're starting to win, I think, and we have to sort of take advantage of it and start fighting not on our own ground where people are attacking us, and like, most of those have been repelled easily. We have to start taking more ground outside, and I don't know what that exactly looks like.
No, that's more than fair. I know I'm trying to get better about not asking so many speculative questions. Although if I ever meet someone who has all the right answers to my speculative questions, I'm going to take them to Vegas with me, because I got some money I'm going to put to you park there.
Yeah.
Uh, Jimmy, I want to have this conversation with you. We've done it once before a little bit, but given the recent news and the announcement of the federal student loan program and Biden's plans, I want to unpack it a little bit with you. And I'm going to preface it by admitting wholeheartedly, I had about $21,000 total left. 19,000 of that was federal. I was a Pell Grant recipient, and because of this, I will now no longer have student loan debt. Like, the last $1,000, I'm going to just pay off this month or next month when I feel like it. I recognize at its core, all this is a stimulus check, or even a bailout, akin to what Bank of America got back in 2008, or akin to GM following them, or even the airlines like American Airlines 2 years ago. To me, it reads no different at its core. I do, however, feel my bias is leading me towards this, absolutely, that this is at least a better construct that if you're going to give money out rather than giving it to these corporations that were mismanaged and rather allow the market to dictate they fucked up, you have these student loans that in certain situations where it's far too much, students can't even declare bankruptcy on them. Like the loans themselves weren't designed well enough to allow for the market to correct itself. I don't think this is a solution. This isn't even a band-aid, in my opinion. The root issue is not solved. I agree with all of those points. I'm just curious, in your opinion, where do we go from here? We have reports that the Federal Reserve is already putting out that the debt limit is now ballooned drastically as a result of this. We're going to decrease the amount of tax revenue and interest payment revenue that the government was expected. We've essentially slashed an asset off of our balance sheet. I'm just kind of curious, like what you think of how this situation will play out economically.
I mean, it's kind of like you said. It's no different than a fiscal stimulus. It's no different than the $600 stimmy checks we got. It's just targeted at different people, and quite frankly, at people that made poor economic decisions in attending college. A lot of the people that have these student loans, they didn't even finish, right? Like those are not necessarily people you're gonna want to bail out. They made pretty bad decisions, but I mean that's his way of buying votes. I have lots of qualms from sort of like a constitutional standpoint. How is it that the president can do this unilaterally without Congress? And how is it that he's able to forgive loans that he didn't make? Right? Like if like forgiveness, or at least that word implies that you're the offended party, or you're the one that um that did the loaning. He's not. He wasn't even in office or whatever, and it wasn't done by him. It was a federal student loan program that was issued by banks. So like there are all sorts of weird things around this, but it really isn't anything more than a stimulus. It's just printing more money, and removing it from the balance sheet of individuals who have student loan debt and putting it on the federal um, balance sheet. But it's essentially going to expand the money supply, because now they don't have those loans anymore. They're no longer on those books. They're just on other books. So yeah, I mean it's not really forgiveness per se. Yeah, it's really no different than any other government spending to me, especially the kind that's deficit spending, which this inevitably will be. And it looks to me politically like he's buying votes, right? he's
100%.
yeah. We know that college graduates favor Biden. We know that women favor Biden. And both those constituencies tend to have more student debt. Not in least part because more women go to college and graduate from college now. So and they're less likely to take the higher paying jobs out of college. So I mean, like this is straight vote buying to me. And all right, it's, call me cynical, but I mean, this is kind of what my last article was about. Fiat politics suck, and this is part of the consequences of that. If you're not part of this group, then you're getting screwed. And it's not going to be obvious, but you're going to be paying more money somewhere at the grocery store. And if you paid back your loans, you're even more screwed, because you could have had free money, but you don't qualify now. So, I mean, this is I don't make too big of a deal out of it, because it's kind of what I've come to expect. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of cynical.
No, like, look, you are more than entitled to your opinion, and I know my biases lead me to have my opinion, and like my incentive is literally to it. And I want to ask you this question because, like, I hated the bailouts of the banks. I hated the bailouts of the car companies. I've hated every single corporate bailout. In this instance where I now get bailed out, I'm okay with it because it's me. Is there a growing issue of, if you recognize the system is flawed but can benefit from the system, should you use the system to your advantage, or should you remove yourself entirely from the system?
Yeah, I mean, I think morally the better thing to do is to remove yourself from the system. And I take great inspiration with Ron Paul. And as you know, he was a many term congressman. Dr. No is what they called him because he would vote no on all kinds of spending and stuff like that. But he's also a medical doctor. And one of the things that he did, which gives me so much respect for him, is that in his practice, he refused to take Medicare and Medicaid or any federal health program. He just refused. He's like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I mean, I think he knew the economic results would mean that, like there would be it would lead to a lot more people getting treated on Medicare and a lot more doctors that do that sort of thing. But he didn't want any part of it. So and, any new doctor that would come into his practice, he would just say, okay, well, here are the rules. We're not taking any Medicare. We're not taking any Medicaid. If you want to work for me, then that's how we're gonna take private health insurance, but that's about it. And that's what he did. And that's, I think, what a person of integrity would do. And like, I get it. You got this student loan and it's being forgiven, and I don't think you even have to apply for it, right? Like, it's just going to be canceled or something like that. You don't have
To
to
be
do
honest, I don't
anything.
know.
Yeah, and
I'm
I mean, just kind of like the stimulus checks that I received, right? Like, it just sort of comes in the mail. It's like, what? It's already deposited into my bank account. Um, it's part of the system. I like, I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do. Just don't like go around promoting like forgiveness for student loans. I think you'll be okay. But I would like to think that more of us want to be like Ron Paul and sort of stand on principle. But that said, like, how do you even give that money back or say, okay, I'm gonna pay off this loan or whatever? I don't know if you can. And it's all kind of a corrupt game already. So it's like I can see the argument for, well, like if I'm gonna let's not give everybody else an advantage and penalize myself. I get that. But yeah, this is the ridiculousness of fiat politics, is that it makes for this sort of like division because of the money at play. It divides people, and it shouldn't, because it's not about class against class or one group against another. It shouldn't be, but that's what they make it, because the money's there to be redistributed. Right, we're going to take from here and give it to these people, and that's unfortunately exacerbated by fiat money.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on, like, I feel like every individual has certain things that they themselves are willing to go out and do. And then there are other things that they candidly just don't want to deal with. And it could be stuff as simple as, like, I don't want to have to deal with going and finding a source of water. If that means I have to pay a certain tax to wherever I live because they're going to handle that for me, I'm comfortable paying that. Same goes, frankly, with like maintaining and building my roads. I'm curious for you if there is anything that you would prefer to not do yourself, what that would be, and in turn, how would you go about handling that without the state?
Yeah, it's always all about the price, right? Like like you might not want to handle water, but you're also getting water at like an insanely cheap price, right? Like if you had to pay somebody to go draw water from a neighborhood well and bring it back, you would first of all not use nearly as much water, and you'd be paying a lot more per liter of it, right? So there is a price at which that's not going to be worth it for you either. It's just that the government makes it artificially cheap by using fiat money to steal from a bunch of people. Similar thing with roads. Like if you had to pay way more for the same road, you probably wouldn't want the state to take care of it. This is the beauty of the market process is people will pay what makes sense for them, and if enough people want to use it and pay for it, then you have a business. And the thing is, without the state, you would still have water, available to your house or whatever. Now, that may take very different forms, and the price might be very different, and whatever. But there are always alternatives. I mean, like even if like no one's delivering water to your house, you might be able to set up some sort of like rain catching mechanism on the roof of your house and like some filtration system, something like that, or have water delivery, physically, or some other thing that's possible. There are all sorts of ways in which alternatives will come about. The problem with the state is that it has a monopoly and it sets the price, and it's not very efficient, and it imposes one price on everybody, and you don't really have a choice when it comes to um, their services, and that makes it inefficient and costs more than it should. And this is where, or it costs too little. And this is where it would be very helpful to have a market. And now what does that look like? I don't know. That's up to all the entrepreneurs that see the opportunity to take advantage of. But that's how it works in everything, right? Like if I want cowboy hats, there's a certain amount that I'm willing to pay. That for a certain quality of hat, and I do the shopping, and that's and if I think the utility of a cowboy hat is higher than the money that I'm spending, then I'll go buy it. And similar on the other side, if the utility of the money that they're getting versus what they're making makes sense, then they'll make that trade, and that's a lot better and creates more wealth overall than state-based things.
I really wish I knew how to work Restream a lot better so I could pull D348's comment which says never stop wearing cowboy hats, Jimothy. Jimmy, I don't believe you and I had a chance to break down the fiat politics article. It has been a little while.
Mm.
I'd love to go down this rabbit hole with you. I have no one to stop me from going down the political conversation, so that's what we're going to do today. Um, Talk to us a little bit, or I want to start first with super PACs and just the donation structure that is behind the current political system. Like, whether or not you agree with him, Roger Stone is a character straight out of a comic book, in my opinion. He is like Lex Luthor, but somehow actually more villainous and a real human being. The father of the entire super PAC system we have today. Curious how you feel like this feels like to me that the epitome of fiat politics is the way the donations come and go. I'd love your thoughts there.
Yeah, American politics is a little bit strange because we don't have explicit bribes; we have implicit bribes, and this largely happens through super PACs and things like that. And instead of getting your money up front, you get it afterwards as like a lobbyist or something like that, and you make your money, I guess, quote unquote, more honestly that way. But it is what it is. It's a bribe, and super PACs and many of these things are essentially ways to sort of come around that. Um, The big problem here is that there is a prize to be won, and that prize is the ability to control the money printer or to figure out how to spend the money that the money printer makes. And those are very powerful incentives, and you're going to get a lot more people caring about politics because it starts taking over more and more of your life, which unfortunately has happened over the last 50 years. So, super PACs are just, one small part of this whole system. The people that want certain things are going to want to, you know, do what they can to get it. And from a market calculation, if it costs more to if something is worth X amount of dollars to them and it costs Y and Y to do a super PAC or whatever else, and Y is less than X, then you're going to go do it. That's just how market incentives work. Um, Now, if they didn't have like infinite money into super PACs, they'd find some other way to use it. So, I mean, in that sense, it's whatever. But that's what you're seeing is this game theory playing out of incentives, where if you spend enough money on lobbying, you can kind of get the outcomes that you want. And if you get the outcome that you want, then that's worth a larger amount to you. Now, the whole process is destructive as hell, and that's something that I point out in the politics article is that market transactions and things like that are much more wealth building. Politics, it's like wealth destroying, right? Like you can spend $10 million on lobbying for some subsidy that gets you 100 million, but that 100 million is just being stolen from a lot of people. So you've gotten 90 million for yourself, but in a sense you've created a wave of destruction of value by causing all of this money to be stolen and making other industries less competitive or less value adding. So it causes all sorts of evil, and that's kind of the point, is that um, politics, because of fiat money's presence, because of this prize that's out there, it becomes a civilization destroying thing, and that's unfortunate. And the better way is to get rid of fiat money.
If only we can just get Jimmy Song to be president. Like, it doesn't even need to be a full 4-year term. I just quick little 1 month, take down the whole fiat system, and then off to retirement on your ranch somewhere.
I don't think that would work. First of all, presidents don't have that much power, and you kind of saw it with the Donald Trump presidency and even the Joe Biden presidency. And I was reading about how Trump wanted to get out of Somalia really badly, and he's like, "Can't we just leave?" And all these internal people wouldn't let him. Like there's a whole deep state that exists to keep you in line, basically. And in a sense, I see Joe Biden's presidency as sort of like a reflection of that. Like, they don't even need like a live body, right? Like he could be dead for all we know. He could be like the first weekend that Bernie's like president or whatever. Doesn't matter. Like he he doesn't need to really exist. He's just almost literally a figurehead. And all the stuff that's happening around them are strings pulled by other people, and that's, I think, how it's been for a while. It's just that we tend to focus our attention on whoever happens to hold the office, but they don't actually have that much power, because the fiat system is sort of like it's almost like an entity unto itself that enslaves all these other people. And this is kind of a cool concept that I learned a while back, and it's from Jacques Ellul's book, The Technological Society. And his argument is that there's systems that once they get started, they take on sort of like a life of their own. And I'm sure you've kind of felt this. If you've ever been in a band or a sports team or something like that, you have the team, right? And everybody in the band or the sports team can turn over, but the spirit of the team somehow remains. And it's like they there's like a whole entity that's outside yourself that sort of like uh is the thing that everyone's fighting for. Almost everything is kind of like that. There's a momentum to government or the deep state or whatever you want to call it that has control, or that almost like functions on its own. It almost has a mind of its own other than any of its members. And we tend to think that they're under our control, but it's actually the other way around. We're under their control. There's a purpose to this larger organization that we submit to. And for the state, it continues to grow because they're growing fat on the on all of the fiat money that's available through bureaucracy and rent seeking. And you could think of every bureaucrat as sort of like a part of that system, somebody that's enslaved by this giant bureaucracy thingy that has a life of its own. And the motivation of that entity is to keep perpetuating itself. And every member within it keeps wanting to perpetuate it. And that's basically what we have with the US government. And this is the sad reality, is that fiat money is their food, right? Like if you have fiat money, it'll grow enormous. And it's not something that you can really stop very easily. Even cutting back a little bit, going back to the budget of even 10 years ago is like almost an impossibility in Congress for that reason. There's a momentum to this thing, and it only really goes in one direction. The only way to really kill it is to starve the beast. And unfortunately, this whole political system is sort of like an outgrowth of that. These are the games that you have to play with this beast, and the beast is stronger than ever and continues to feast on our the value that we've created, and it's eating civilization right along with it.
Uh, it's an interesting period of society to live in, because it's as though all of these things that have existed for decades, if not centuries, are finally coming to light, and it's like the end of this cycle. Um, it's exciting. We do this work not for ourselves, but for future generations. Uh, I, I wanna I wanna keep going down this sort of rabbit hole of the incentives in politics, um, and how Bitcoin can help shift those incentives. My personal thing is the accountability of money, where if everything was operated on a Bitcoin standard, the accountability would drastically increase overnight. Um, that's just one facet of this. I'm curious your thoughts, and where Bitcoin fits into this.
Well, Bitcoin makes for honest trade, and this is the big thing about politics. It's not an honest trade because I think there's a quote about like, if you're using your own money for your own benefit, you're going to be very careful and figure out the trade-offs between how much it costs and what value you're getting, and make sure that those are in alignment. If you're using else's money for your own benefit, you're going to spend however much, because essentially it's somebody else's money. If you're using your own money for somebody else's benefit, then you're going to be as cheap as possible. If but if you're using somebody else's money for somebody else's benefit, then you have no motivation whatsoever. And that's unfortunately the position that we put every government bureaucrat. You're taking somebody else's money for the benefit of other people. So you're not getting any benefit, or it's not costing you in any way. So all economic calculation is removed from your decision making. In which case, what are you going to care about? Well, you're going to care about all sorts of other things, like for a lot of bureaucrats, it is getting up the status ladder, right? Or having more influence, or getting better press or something like that. And those are the things that drive them. And if you've ever worked with a nonprofit or people that work in government or anything like that, this frustration is seriously real, because at least in places like India or whatever, you just pay a bribe and it's fine. At least you know what their motivation is. Like working with a bureaucracy where you don't know their motivation is extremely frustrating. You can't get anything done because you have no idea what they want. Um, Unfortunately, that's a situation a lot of these things, these government things are in. And it makes for a very frustrating time. And this is why people can't get any things done, because with money, the motivations are much easier to fathom and incentives are easier to fathom. And you make up for deficiencies with more money, or you make up for the deficiency of money with other things. That's how things work, and it's a lot easier to reason about and to plan about around. In a government uh situation with like no motivations about costs or benefits, it becomes very political. And that's essentially what my article is talking about. And you study any socialist country or anything like that, and this is a much bigger problem in those places than it is in the U.S. And you can clearly see it. It's like, okay, well, how do we figure out how much of this to get or how much of that to get or whatever? And people have no problem like spending enormous amounts of resources because it's not their money; it's just somebody else's. There's no self-regulation whatsoever. I was reading about how in Soviet Russia there would be all the way everything was organized was that there would be a particular ministry that would need to do a particular thing. But they largely centralized the production of certain things. And if you ask for another ministry for, I don't know, a ton of steel or something like that, um, it would take forever, and you wouldn't get it in on time, and then your whatever you're trying to produce would be in jeopardy. So what would happen is that that ministry would start making their own steel just so they can meet their own quotas, right? And this is like duplication of effort and all this other stuff that socialism and communism was supposed to take away. In addition, even though the steel mill might be right next door, right? They wouldn't be able to procure it because it has to go through this bureaucracy. So if there was steel that was more readily available to that ministry, like all the way across the country, they would just ship it. So all these like train lines would be clogged up with like stuff going back and forth, which would be enormously inefficient. Now, in a capitalist system, this all gets solved with prices, right? Because steel from 3,000 miles away is going to be more costly than steel from next door. And you would be able to figure out, okay, well, like, let's make sure that you make a profit and I make a profit. So, we'll do this or whatever. And this is a cost benefit analysis that every person in a capitalist system engages in. But instead, with government, with bureaucracy, with fiat system, with politics, there is almost none of that. In fact, the only cost benefit analysis that tends to happen is in how much more power can I get? How do I get what I want? And it's opaque, not obvious at all. And it takes a lot longer and there's a lot more friction. So, in that sense, the idea that government can be better at anything is just laughable, because you don't government or anything is made up of people and their incentives are not going to be in alignment in these systems where you don't have cost benefit analyses.
I wonder though, like, and I'm not. I would much rather see the state be done with, and I think we have overcorrected, and the next course correct is smaller groups and civilizations. I'm curious though if for some classes of people or for certain individuals who value certain things, having a government have far too much control over their day-to-day lives may be what they require and just need to operate. Do you think there can be a system where, much like the way we talk much like the way the sovereign individual talks about how there will be different jurisdictions that will draw people in for reasons, could there be a coexistence of truly state-run jurisdictions and then truly sovereign jurisdictions, or will the state-run jurisdictions just try to take control of everything?
Well, I think smaller states are inevitable. So, places like the United States and the European Union, and you're starting to see some cracks in a lot of that, right? Like with the UK with Brexit and all these like independence movements all over, Europe and stuff like that. The monolithic state is not a natural thing. If you The only reason you had them was, uh, or at least in feudal times and stuff, was so that you would be able to tax a larger area and so on. Um, but the current reason is mostly around economic unity, and that requires sort of like a common currency and so on. I don't think that's the natural state of things. And under a harder money standard, I don't see if that gets removed as a big reason, you get smaller states. And if you have smaller states, then you're gonna have a lot more choices. You might have a completely socialist state over here, and you have another state over there that's way more freedom based or whatever. That was actually the original design of the United States. Every state was supposed to be sovereign on itself, and then you had a loose confederation. And that was the Articles of Confederation, right? Like that was the initial design of the United States until they were like, okay, we got to do something about all this debt and all this other stuff, and we might just break apart. And they came up with the Constitution, and still tried to preserve that state sovereignty stuff, but that got more or less wiped out under Lincoln, and completely solidified under FDR. So smaller states, I think, will allow you to experiment, and even in the limited amount of experimenting that we're able to do, you can see what's happening. You can see a lot of people move away from New York and California to Texas, for example, and to Tennessee and to Florida. Those are ways in which we can see what works and what doesn't. And eventually, economic value will also flow out of those places. And this is with like enormous advantages that California has. They're still losing people. That tells you how bad their policy actually must be. So all that is to say that like I just want a market of this stuff instead of one imposed on me, and that's, I think, what most people want too. And if you have different beliefs, yeah, go try something else, instead of having one rule for everybody. Like, try different rules. Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
I want to I want to bring up a story, and I don't know how familiar you are with this, but I want to play devil's advocate on the idea of states picking where resources go. While I wholeheartedly do not agree with it, I do think there are instances that have proven historically that a state can actually execute resources in the right way and in turn create opportunity as an end result. Specifically, I wanted to bring up South Korea's plans to build steel mills that they started back in 1965. And this was I don't know how familiar you are with the story, but the short version is they wanted to build these steel mills and nobody wanted to give them financing, and they continued to offer benefits to different foreign companies, foreign nationals, to just like come here, we will give you the land, we will give you tax breaks, whatever you need to build this infrastructure here in our country. No country would bite. And eventually the Pohang Iron and Steel Company was set up in 1968 by the state, and it transformed to the point that by the mid 80s, it was considered one of the most cost efficient producers of low grade steel in the world. By the 90s, it was one of the world's leading steel companies. And then it was privatized in 2001, not for poor performance, but for political reasons. And today, this book is from 2010. Today is the fourth largest steel producer in the world by quantity of output. Boom. I know that it's really easy to discount stories like this as like they got it right once and look at the thousands of other times they've gotten it right. But do we sometimes owe it to nations when they are trying to develop and they see opportunities like this to take those chances? And I want to bring it back to Bitcoin like this. We hear a lot of these attacks against Bukele from human rights advocates. There are similar attacks to what the leaders of the prime minister of Singapore saw during his sort of growth in that country. And that country had a very quote unquote authoritarian leader, but that authoritarian leader led them to be what now is considered the Western hub of Asia, and a very large technological hub and access point for the West into Asia. Bukele has said as much. He's modeling El Salvador off of Singapore and wants to turn El Salvador to that hub for Central and South America. But this is a state-run thing. Like this is Bukele doing it as the state. So I'm curious your thoughts in that aspect, where there are examples where the state has done it right. There are examples where the state has gotten it wrong. Do we trust outside now of fiat politics, outside of American politics at least? How do we justify some of these actions?
I don't. I think that's still evil. I don't care that they created this giant steel industry or whatever. It's not that different than like a fiat subsidized airline or something like that. I think it's taking resources from other people and pouring it into what you think might work or whatever. Now, did it create value? Absolutely. They are a very, very good steel manufacturer, but what the counterfactual is the thing that we don't know. What would have happened if they didn't do that? If they didn't have insane amounts of resources going into the steel industry? Would Korea be in an even better position if there was more entrepreneurship? If there was other industries that could have thrived? Would Hyundai be making the best cars in the world right now instead of, say Toyota or something like that? Would there be like, you know, lots of other sort of innovations that could have come about if they didn't focus so much on steel? The problem isn't so much that this succeeded. I mean, success by whatever measure. It's that there's inevitably inefficiencies in government run things that we don't really get to see. And this is one of them. I mean, I'm sure there were lots of mistakes that they made that a normal market wouldn't have made, and a lot of people's rights that were violated, a lot of people's effort and energy that were wasted rather than on that rather than something else that would have been more beneficial to adding value to not just the people of South Korea but all over the world. So it's it's easy to say, oh look, here's what they made, and it's obvious that these things were made and therefore you have to count it as good. No, like you can say the same thing about the stimulus check. I got $600. I bought this, then this, that, and the other. But you don't know the counterfactual. You don't know what would have happened had you not done that, or had there been some other path. And we don't know that counterfactual, and it could have been even better. And in fact, I suspect it would have been a lot better. Um, it's a weird argument to make because it appeals to sort of like the people that see the outcomes and say, okay, well then this was clearly good because it did X, Y, or Z. You don't know if it could have done even more good had you not done it, and that's unfortunately the argument that's been going around since FDR. Pretty much, it's like, oh look, we built, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and all these farmers, whatever. It's like, well, if you actually study the economics, it's like looking at trends. The counterfactual looks like if FDR and Hoover hadn't intervened at all, it would have been way, way better. But nobody talks about that, or very few people talk about that, because it's not a reality that we got to experience.
It's like the argument of, well, the banks, if they had failed in 2008, like it would have been such a disaster. Like we don't know that.
Mhm.
We could have gotten
Mhm.
a whole new system of lending and financial institutions that could have been better. And I will safely tell you that if Bank of America and the airlines were allowed to fail 2 years ago, we would have a far better experience at the airlines, especially this year. I can safely say that. With zero factual basis, just purely my intuition of a 20-year-old child in this world.
Mm.
Jimmy, go ahead, please.
Well, I don't know. Like the whole thing strikes me as like a lot of idle speculation, and talking heads on TV especially like to make these sorts of arguments. But this is why I want more states and more experimentation. And you can see what works when you do X versus Y. If you have, and like the data points that we do have, like any sort of like socialist stuff, it tends to not work out very well. Like, South Korea may have created a really nice steel industry, but talk about all the Latin American and African countries that tried to start their own industry and completely bombed, and there was tons of embezzlement, bribery, like just all sorts of evil going on in a lot of those things. Nobody talks about those things. It's kind of a cherry picked example, and honestly, even that one I think it could have been better in a free market. So
No,
beware
I
of arguments like
100%
that.
cherry.
Yeah.
I 100% literally cherry picked it out of a book because I remembered that passage. But
Mm.
no, you're absolutely right. Like I will admit that for every one of those stories, you can find at least one, if not probably more, that just show you that the state made a decision that was in the worst interest, or believed to be at this point in the worst interest of its citizens and its people. Jimmy, we're coming up on time, and I want to give you the final word. Um, we talked about a lot here today. If there's anything in particular that we didn't get a chance to touch on.
Well, wait, why don't we go over the top 10? Well, actually, I think I made it a top 12 over here in the altcoins.
Oh yeah, the new altcoins coming to you soon. Okay, so
Not a lot of fun writing that one.
I'm gonna okay. There's one that I want to say for last, and I'm gonna message you something real quick in the chat.
Mhm.
But I'll start with my favorite one, which was Woman Coin. One of my so I read a fantastic script where it's called Woke Coin, and this guy he like pitched to a bunch of VCs. He's like, it's woke coin. You get tokens for being woke, and they don't hire him. He goes home to his fiance. His fiance breaks up with him, and then like in this like drunken rampage, he goes and changes the whole code of woke coin to man coin, and it's just like the most like degenerate things possible. Get you more. It's honestly, it's a show that deserves to see the light of day. One day, and then of course the sucker recruit 10 people to get rewarded. Like, could you just describe a Ponzi scheme without saying the words Ponzi scheme there, Jimmy?
I just like the name because of the phrase, there's a sucker born every minute or whatever. But yeah,
I do like that one. I will give, so my final one, Bitcoin Nakamoto. The truth is, and I'm going to change it. So you had written a fork of Bitcoin for those that believe A16, Andreessen Horowitz, VC firm should own Satoshi's coins. I mean, I don't think Andreessen owns so many shit coins that he probably thinks that they have so much value he doesn't need Bitcoin.
Uh-huh.
But I want to use that as a segue to essentially bring up a campaign that's going to be going on tomorrow. It's going to be exclusively on Rumble because we're afraid that YouTube will literally take our channel down. We are all HODLNOT. HODLNOT is fighting Craig Wright. There is a trial going on in Norway over whether or not Craig Wright actually thinks he is Satoshi Nakamoto, or at least claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto. There's a campaign to raise funds for HODLNOT's defense. As it turns out, the legal system in Norway requires HODLNOT to pay Craig Wright's legal fees until the end of the trial, once it's determined how this sort of case pans out, then the fees are finalized at that point. But for the meantime, because he is the one being sued by Craig Wright in the laws of Norway, that is how it works. So there will be an ongoing campaign tomorrow on Rumble, starting at, I believe, our normal start time of 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. But again, Rumble only. A few people that you know, love, respect will be participating. It will be hosted from BitBot Boom itself. There's a Defend Satoshi page, so please be sure to go and check that out as well. It's a very real issue. The crazy thing is this trial, in the eyes of Norway at least, will determine if Craig Wright is or is not Satoshi Nakamoto as he claims.
That will be interesting because I don't know if I've ever seen someone that is so obviously fake that that continues down this road of legal lawfare. But I mean, I guess that's how he's spending the money he scammed money from. Other ones, usually they're happy, like buying Lambos and stuff. But this guy wants to spend it on lawsuits. Kind of a very strange thing to me.
It's as fiat as they come, but I digress. It does begin. I apologize. It begins at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so it's going to be a bright and early. I did not sign up for 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific time. That's for damn sure. But I digress, guys. Jimmy, thank you so much. If you guys don't follow Jimmy Song at this point, I really don't know what you do with all your time. As you can see, it's at Jimmy Song. Jimmy, anything else for the audience to know?
I'll be speaking at BitBlock Boom on Saturday, and I'll be speaking at Baltic Honey Badger the week after. I will probably at some point write, finish the article that I've been working on. So yeah.
Looking forward to that one, Jimmy. And as always, thank you so much for your time. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, 3 hours with Q is over. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sticking with it, despite all my technical difficulties and my inability to give you guys a carrot code or pull up comments from the chat onto the screen. I will remind everyone very shamelessly that tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. Ticket prices went up last weekend. They will be going up again soon. You're not going to want to miss the biggest Bitcoin party in all of Europe land. Lock in your tickets now before ticket prices go up. And again, tomorrow's stream will be exclusively on Rumble only. So for the YouTube fam, feel free to hop on over to Rumble, check it out, and it'll be a very exciting stream. So I hope you guys will tune into that. Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to click end stream. Hang on. How do I, this one?